Welcome to Kamjiverse. This is your exclusive bridge between the legacy of classical Africa and the triumphs of modern African revolutions. You won't find this connection anywhere else. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Share this video with friends and family. Become a channel member or join our Patreon. The links are waiting in the description. Let's honor our sacred legacy and ignite our future together. Share this video with friends and
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. Kemet unfiltered, let pride takes flight.
Shut up, you dumb, you sound like a coon. Get out, stay clear of this room. We proud, we black, rich, and forever stay paid. They lies and killing spraying from the soil they mislay. Their tales a sham, cooked up by scammers who toil. So shut up, chief X, you're a grifter, spoil. You're both having drivel like your soul. Coptic verse, their language is liturgical, not to rehearse curse. While Ethiopian and Nubian cops and Cairo so merciful. Drop truth surgical, leaving your myths pitiful.
You act like black folks ain't speaking Remy, give me your idiocy. Runs deep, can't study, can't even see. Bubble brother, hush up before I knock your sugar out. Don't twist our ancestors' lore, I'll butcher your clout.
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. Kemet unfiltered, let pride takes flight.
You claim you came from Baltimore, just more trash on display. I bet the faithful flock was up, dusting your ass away. Into that fat orange cat, you're dumber than a box of rocks. Pushing assimilation as politics to shock like cheap mock.
We spot you for a mile, your act just isn't slick. This is real knowledge, not your kuna logical scholarship. If you scared, you should be watch as I spit. God's flame, no bars, no game. You're done when I put you to shame.
When your twisted lies crumble and your fake talk fades, our united voice echoes, truth never degrades. From the ashes of the sea, our spirit invades. In Kemet's name, your false crown forever cascades.
Ghazi aka Amir, the scam's a total disgrace. Spitting away with one jargon at a crooked scheme and pace. You twist words, confused, try to carve up a space. A frog, your fake gospel body cue with no base. You try to fool slow raps with your bogus empty guys, but your clumsy act crumbles under truth's piercing eyes. Kemet stands united, no room for your deceitful art. Step aside, false prophet, your lies will break a heart.
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. Kemet unfiltered, let pride takes flight.
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. Kemet unfiltered, black pride takes flight.
We are live in full effect, 100%. We got the great elder scholar Chuck Morgan in the building. How you doing?
All is good. How you feel, bro?
I feel amazing. You know, we about to get this on and popping.
Okay.
I'm super excited, you know, just for this show, this episode, this broadcast. Because, you know, as you know, there was a really controversial topic dealing with Black Sumer. Now, before we get started, if you can hear us both loud and clear, give us some ones in the chat. Just want to make sure everything is loud and clear as it should be, and that we can be heard. If we're too low or even too high, just let us know. Give us a 2 if the audio doesn't sound good, but give us a 1 if you can hear us good. Just gonna wait for them ones to come in as we wait. You know, so like the video that I posted, you know, a lot of people assumed that, you know, it was my scholarship, but as you know already, shout out to Patah in the building. You know, I am not an expert in cuneiform. I've actually never even took a cuneiform class, so I didn't even know the first steps about how to read it. But with your scholarship, like, I felt that it would be good, you know, to present it to the public, because I had never really dealt with Sumer deeply. I mean, I, you know, read, you know, just some of the scholars, Drusilla Junji Houston, Runoka Rashidi. I mean, I had like a surface level view of it. I heard about Sumer in the Bible, and, you know, from that perspective. So, like, I was always one of the ones who said, yeah, I think it's possible that they could have been black, but I never really had like a deeply emotional attachment to it, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, like, when I made the video and there was so much pushback, like, there was so many people, you know, Hebrew Israelites, you know, Christians, and, you know, some of the arguments that they made, I remember reading, and I was like, you know, like, do they have a point? Because if I read the Bible is pretty clear about, you know, Cush being, you know, Sumer, or Gihon at least being Cush, and things like that were pretty clear. But before I get into it, you know, what, as Scholar Chuck Morgan, what exactly inspired you to go into this field? Like, what inspired you to study cuneiform in Sumeria?
Well, my inspiration really started sometime around the late 1970s. In other words, that was when I first came across the whole cuneiform thing. It wasn't until the 1990s that I started reading some of Zechariah Sitchin's books and the likes. At that time, I was, you know, I was deep inside the, back then they were known as the Ansars. I was coming out of the Washington, D.C. branch in Florida. And, you know, he had gotten to a point where he was addressing or dealing with, quote, Sumerian doctrine. And I had already been familiar with it to an extent. But when it started going into these different directions, I started seeing that there was some deviations, or there was some plagiarism as it related to Sitchin and Eric von Daniken, that whole Chariots of the Gods thing. That's really when I started seeing the connection, is where it all starts stemming from. What really inspired me to go further with it was when I would see videos online, or some of the books, even some of the Yorks's writings, where he talked about various Sumerian deities. And of course, we had Sister Nicole Lopez and Joyce Hayes, who did the illustrations in most of the books, and how he would depict Enki or Anu, any of these characters. They will always be chocolate coated.
Yeah.
And as I did more research, I couldn't find anything that necessarily substantiated that. So as the years went by, you know, you get past that, because I spent a lot of my time in the early 2000s, you know, dealing with combating the York doctrine. But it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that I actually decided to just sit down and learn the language. I started off with just books and trying to do what do you call it? I forget the word they use. You try to do the self-taught thing. And I moved from
Autodidact?
there. Yeah, autodidact and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that led me to reach out to certain people, and then I was able to find quality teachers who dealt with the Sumerian language. I was able to link up with Dr. Joshua Bowen and his lovely wife Megan,
Mm.
and I took 2 classes with them. I took the beginners level and the intermediate level, and then I was able to contact another individual out of Italy who was a Sumerian language grammar student, and he had received his doctorate in that, and he was doing classes online, so I was able to consult with him, and then I started taking classes. And oh, we need to put you in the advanced class, that kind of stuff. So that was what started it. So what my motivation behind it was, if I had at least a familiarity with the language, I could then be able to look at some of the concepts or the ideas, or even just some of the ideologies that people were putting forth about the Sumerians themselves and what they said. And so when I was able to go through various inscriptions, I started seeing, this is not what they said, this is what somebody said on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it took in the course of going through the classes, taking the grammar classes, I had spent an extreme amount of time going through the most. I mean, you haven't even scratched the surface, because there are literally hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets that have yet to be translated, and then there's thousands that have been. So I've been able to go into some of the various databases that held these documents, and I can do a search and find specific inscriptions, or the lack of those inscriptions, or find them in another language group altogether, or a whole new different group of people who just happen to be in Mesopotamia but were not Sumerians.
Yeah.
Like where you would get when people would talk about, say, Nibiru, for example. Okay, so when people say Nibiru, and then they say the Sumerians said this, and they talked about that. Well, number one, Nibiru is not a Sumerian term. And I learned by way of the language. Now, in the flip side, I was able to find that, there is a word, Nibru, which was a sacred temple that they built in Nippur.
Mm.
And that was where they say that Enlil, that was his dwelling place on earth.
Yeah.
And what I learned was, by going through the language, how Zechariah Sitchin was able to take a Sumerian term, Nibru, which was a sacred place for Enlil, and just add an I, and that I then turned into Nibiru, and say that it was a Sumerian word. No, it's an Akkadian word. And that was the term that was used usually for the planet Jupiter or Mercury. Yeah. So that was something that I learned early on, and I said, okay, this is fun.
Yeah, so like going deep into the text corpus and the different pieces of evidence, you're able to learn some things, maybe takes a few things out, and just clarify, any misconceptions or information that you wanted to clarify before.
Well, what I wanted to do was, depending on what it was, I needed to go through every aspect of it. I need to search deep, because I know in doing this stuff and when you're making these refuting cases, you got to go through everything. You got to go in places that not even necessarily even directly related to it, but somebody's going to pull it up.
Yeah.
And so I had to try to, and fortunately, my line of work gave me enough time overnight to be able to do that. And it took me months, in one case, literally a year before I was able to put something together on a PowerPoint. One PowerPoint I had, which is like the one of dealing with when I initially came out with, was Where the Sumerians Lie.
Yeah.
And that took about a year to put together. And the brother Garfield Reed was nice enough to let me come on. He was interested in it, and that was where that kicked off. And then it just branched off from there into many different areas. So right now, I'm just really into it. But what from so much, see, because I went through the whole black thing as far as movements and groups, and hanging out with Steve Coakley and all that stuff, naming the names and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I have that in me, and so I wanted to not to offend, but I wanted to share the research that I have, and you take it what you can with it, spit out the rest of it, because I figured that if I go through all of the known sources, then it would be easily acceptable in terms of where people can see it, check the sources, check the information, and see if it's valid. And it's been pretty successful because in some of the work that I have been able to put together, I have shared it with seasoned veterans in Assyriology, people who specialize in Sumerian grammar, contact scholars, Sumerologists, just contacting them because a guy, Alan, what's his name, John Allen Halloran, gave me a list of contacts that I can, contact some people through their email, and maybe if I had a question, maybe they can share some light on it. Then I was able to do that, and I would share my work with them, and to my surprise, some of them were very impressed.
I mean, I've been impressed just like with the amount of depth like that you've been in, because again, like I said, my whole life, or maybe not my whole life, but just my time in Black consciousness, I've always seen, that the Sumerians were Black or connected to African people, and I've compiled a list of just some of the most known resources on this. And we're gonna watch, some of their content, and I'm gonna get you get your take on what you think that you're hearing from the researchers, these researchers that I have presented, and then I'm gonna go through a list of questions just from my research, from some of the audience members, people who are adamant that the Sumerians were Black, they have evidence that they were Black. We're gonna do like a rapid fire session, and we're gonna see what we could get from this. And okay. Yeah, Clyde Winters, Door of El. Clyde Winters is one of the scholars that I will be presenting. Actually, he's probably the first one that I will be presenting. So right now, I have a video on the screen by Dr. Clyde Winters from Philip Shock Matthews titled Sumerians in South America. So I will fast forward to the part that I want to discuss. Let me see where we at right here. And we are going to listen to what he has to say, and I'm going to give Scholar Chuck Morgan a chance to respond.
I ain't no scholar, I'm just a brother that can get a little bit of information.
The amount of cuneiform that I got to call you a scholar. I just have to.
Right,
so we gonna listen in, and actually, let me be careful and make sure that I have the right screen on. I made this mistake last time. See, okay, for sure.
Right, ethnicity. You see, back in the day, they wouldn't show you these pictures of the Sumerians. They would only show you these Gudians, some light-skinned people with big old gigantic eyes. Those weren't Sumerians. They were Gudians. Next slide. Here we see Dingar Ningazinda and another leading Gudia before Enki or Anu. Anu, the great god. They always talk about the Anunnaki. And they tell you the Anunnaki came from outer space. And the Anunnaki made everybody. So this is bullshit. Bullshit. But Black people continually teach this mess because they don't do any damn research. Anu. These were Black people that was just ruling the world for a period of time. Next slide. The Sumerians and the Lamanites came to Mesopotamia by boat. They first used these boats in the Eastern Sahara and the Red Sea, and they're analogous to Sumerian craft. Look at some of the ancient boats that you find in the rock art of ancient Africa. You see that these same boats are depicted, and here we see on this particular artifact We see the people in a boat. We see them selling. You see? Then we see those gates and pillars. That means they were selling to a great civilization. This is why they often build their urban centers near rivers and streams. Yes.
Wait, do you have it playing in the background? I think I hear some feedback.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think I heard some feedback. Do you have it playing on another browser in the background?
Well, I had it on my phone. Because,
Okay, yeah.
I can't hear what's being played.
Oh yeah, you can't hear it. Yeah, that's another thing.
That's all good. It's all good. I'm reading along though.
Oh damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could play it, like if you could connect it to a different browser and play it on AirPods, that would be helpful. Or,
I have it on mute. I have my mic on mute. You can still hear it?
Yeah, I could hear it. But if your mic is on, actually, hold on, I'll mute you, and then you can listen to it as I mute you.
Okay.
That's the way to do it. Yeah, my bad about
And
that.
just bring me up when
Yeah, do you want me to go back, or do you want to just keep?
No, keep it going.
Okay, for sure.
What happened is that the Anu, they had built a wonderful civilization. The Great Flood came around 4000 BC. After the Great Flood, many Anu centers of civilization were separated from the rest of the world. So what black people did in Africa is that they began, in a sense, to set out. They began to set out and sail to all these earlier areas so they could rebuild the civilization that was built by the Anu. The Anu is just a name of the people we call pygmies today. Yes, they show you these people in the Congo, living in the forest, and you see these little miniature people, and you say, "Damn, what? They rule the world?" Yes, they rule the world. But it's just like any time a cataclysm comes, anytime there's chaos. What do you think would happen tomorrow if we had a magnetic field? If a magnetic field occurred as a result of a reversal in the orbit of the Earth, automatically every motor, every battery would short circuit. Water would rise and cover up the University of Chicago, because most universities, it's interesting though, that most universities that white people build are near water. They'll all be underwater. No books, no knowledge for them, but that's for them. Family, because your first frequency, you won't have to worry about the books in the library. You'll be able to access those records, the Akashic records, through your genetic memory, and civilization will continue. It'll take a while, because people have to start to realize that they can do things on their own instead of waiting for second frequency to lead them. You can do this. Next slide. Controversy surrounding the Kushite African Black origins of the Sumerians. The controversy around the Kushites' African Black origin of the Elamites, Sumerians, Akkadians, and Assyrians is simple and yet complicated. It involves both the racism exhibited toward the African slave in the Western Hemisphere and Africans generally, which led to the idea that Africans had no history. Yes. I know if you guys listen to our Reverend Matthews on Sunday, he talked about the three Hegels, the three H's. He talked about how they changed how people view the history of the world. The three H's, what they did in a sense, they began to teach that first frequency had no history. They taught that we had no history. They taught that we were nobody. Yet they knew that civilization came from us. We made civilization.
That's right.
It was Julius Opert. He was a Jew guy. You see, and because of the fact that many of the original Jews, not the Ashkenazians, but the Sephardic Jews, most of the Sephardic Jews were descendants of the Moors that lived in Spain. And so since they were descendants of the Moors, what color were the Moors? Black, dark hue. So then therefore, most of the Sephardic Jews, in a sense, were very dark with Negroid features. And so what happened is that Julius Opert, he wanted to create a myth. And he wanted to create the myth that all Semites or all Semitic speaking people were white. And see, this was to accommodate the white ancestry of European Jews who wanted to start saying that they were the Jews. and that the original Jews were white. Yes, it is a trick, but that's what people do. People, in a sense, create histories for themselves, even though it may be a lie. Let's go to the next. You know, giants in the field of Sumerian studies was Colonel Henry Rawlinson and also Julius Oppert. But Henry Rawlinson, he was a very good scholar, and what he did is that he always made sure to teach you that the Sumerians were Cushites, they were black people. You know, as a result, Rawlinson was surprised during his research to discover that the founders of the Mesopotamian civilization were of Cushite origin. Yes, Cushite origin. And even at that time, they knew that the Cushites referred to those black people that lived in what we call modern day Sudan, or Bilad el Sudan. And what do Bilad el Sudan? That means in Arabic, the land of the blacks, you see? And see, Rawlinson made it clear that the Semitic-speaking people of Akkad and the non-Semitic-speaking people of Sumer were both black, or Negro people, who called themselves Sagiga. Sagiga, Sagiga! The black face with black head. In Rawlinson, Sumerians were recognized as Akkadians or Chaldeans, while the Semitic-speaking blacks were called Assyrians. Julius Oppert, he noted that the original founders of Mesopotamian civilization called themselves Ki and Gi, land of the true lords. So what does Ki and Gi mean? It means land of the true lords, or civilized lands. But see, he didn't want people to know that. He wanted to call them, in a sense, you know, he wanted to, in a sense, give the Sumerians the Semitic name. Next slide. And see, the Assyrians, they called the Ki and Gi, you see, they called them Sumeritu, and it's the Sumeritu, or Sumerian, that we call the people who live in this part of Mesopotamia. Right here, you can see the Assyrian king Esarhaddon. Okay, in the past, they never used to show this picture of.
So I'm gonna stop real quick because he's going off. I'm gonna give, you know, Chuck. Do you think you want to respond to some of that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So what about that was true and what about that was false?
Well, let me turn my feet. I'm still watching. Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. So, now I don't disagree with everything that he said. I mean, certainly there was that period in history, even to an extent to today, that you know, certain people in academia advocated that we had no history.
Yeah.
Or that our history was what our history manifested if we had a little bit of this, a little bit of that, as some form of a mixture. I think that's rooted in that Hamitic hypothesis concept.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I do disagree with him on is specifically the name of the Sumerians. I think that what that needs to be addressed, and also a statement he made that and they referred to themselves as Cushites. I challenge anybody to show where in a Sumerian inscription they claim themselves to be Cushites. I put that challenge out years ago, and I still haven't gotten one back yet.
Yeah,
but
and that's what I thought. I always thought that they saw themselves as Cushites, right? But you're saying that there's no inscription of them referring to themselves as Cush?
Of all the thousands of known Sumerian texts, the entire text corpus of Sumerian literature, you will not find a statement or reference to them calling themselves Cushites or Cush or any one of those terms, whether you do it in a transliteration or in the text itself. So I want to share my screen
For sure.
Okay, I had it. Oh, there it is. All right. So let me do it this way, because I want to go through one of my presentations that is going to come out. I'm hoping to get it in book form, and
So what you're saying is going to be a shock to a lot of people because this is a claim that I've heard, that I've even accepted, and I, of course, never actually looked at it, but Kush is like, when I talk to brothers and sisters out there, Sumer Kush, Sumer Kush, Sumer Kush, Sumer Kush. But this is, I mean, I wish I had bombs. You just said you didn't, there's no evidence anywhere.
I'm
of Sumer
confident.
Kush.
I stand by that. I challenge anybody to come forward with the documentation from a Sumerian epic that they refer to themselves as Kush.
Whew. I see
I
sticks and
dare you.
polls in the comments.
Too loud.
Sticks and polls in the comments is saying it's because Kush is English.
Okay.
You agree with
then
that?
Give me the Sumerian word for Kush. Now we're gonna go through that.
Sumerian word for Kush.
I did another presentation. What is it? I'll pull it up shortly.
Yeah, but Patal, other Patala said they were smoking that Kush good.
Yeah, maybe some people pushing this stuff were.
All right, so get
let's walk
into
through
it.
this.
Yeah, let's get into
real
it.
fast.
Yeah.
It's real simple, and I'm going to use. Well, let's start with this right here. The purpose of this presentation is to help bring some clarity, context, and chronology via the most up-to-date data regarding the Sumerian word Sangiga, translated and interpreted as literal blackheads. This name, blackheads, has been cited and used recently by the misinformed and blatant liars as documentation and or as an implication that the ancient people known as Sumerians referred to themselves as the black people. The Sangiga were a special people in Sumerian literature, who the gods treated like beloved sheep, with the gods as the shepherd. And one passage in the Lamet of Sumer and Urim, line 33, this is what Enlil, the shepherd of humanity, did. If you look here, Sangiga is here. This Sangiga is what's causing this problem and where people are missing. Because the ridiculousness of it is that the Sumerians didn't know the difference between a head and a body. Because if they're just singling out their heads alone, what about the body?
Yeah.
Is the body black? Is the body brown? Is it copper? Professor Emeritus of Assyriology, Sumerian History and Language, Professor Samuel Kramer, simplified the true meaning of the name Sangiga in his 1963 book, The Sumerians, A History, Culture, and Character, on page 84 through 85. And I'm going to read this real fast because it hits the point. Inhabiting the four corners of the earth were the Namlulu. This is a Sumerian compound word, probably consisting of lu, man, reduplicated, and the particle nam used to form abstract nouns. It therefore corresponds in formation to the English mankind. That's important. The Sumerian people, the Blackheads, as they call themselves from at least 2000 BC on, were only a part of a larger mankind, but needless to say, a very important part. In fact, they were so important a part that at least in one case, the Blackheads seem to be identified with humanity as a whole. Thus, there is a passage in the first part of the long-known Sumerian flood myth, which reads, at the An, Enki, and Enhersag had fashioned the black-headed people, vegetation luxuriated from the earth, animals, four-legged creatures of the plain were brought artfully into existence. Here, then, blackheads seem to be juxtaposed with plants and animals as if the word referred to mankind as a whole. I can stop it right there. The reason I wanted to stop right there, because if we go further with it, his analysis was clear that these people call themselves blackheads. It was more than just people in their literature. They were people who the gods saw as special. The name blackheads in early English translations, Sangiga, was a name derived in part from the Akkadian word, Zamakakali, meaning humanity. If you read these texts in context, you'll see that it makes sense and it flows through. Now, with humanity, which would be the Akkadian take on the name Namlulu, as Professor Kramer had indicated, Sangiga was a name they would call themselves after the Akkadian and Gutian occupation. Again, this name first appears in circa 2001, 2000 BC during the Third Dynasty period and not prior. That's important because when they say the Sumerians called themselves the Blackheads, well, why did they refer to themselves as Namlulu prior to the Akkadians? Sangiga, post-Akkadian and Gutian name, was not a marker for an ethnic nor racial group. Sumerians describe human activities and human in their world order. After the first creation phase, man behaves like a beast. In the second phase, man obtains the instruments for the establishment of culture. Ultimately, he becomes a true human, the first real humans as a gift from the gods having the ability to revere or praise the Anunna or Anunnaki, meaning of the royal seed. Now, this word sang was used to mean a head. It was also used to denote the first, top, foremost. For example, in a lexical inscription, which you can copy and paste it as PO, what you see it, that verifies this point. So in column 5, and right here, Amar Sang, Amar translates as a young calf, young animal, a youngster. Sang translates as head or front, even first. Therefore, Amar Sang literally translates as head calf or first calf, the foremost calf. When following the context of this inscription, line 10 designates a calf just as the foremost humans, as we had for Sangiga. That is either the leader of the herd or the firstborn of the herd, or perhaps the best of this type of animal. Lines 10 of the lexical list continues the theme of categorizing livestock, specifically calves. They use word combinations to denote the different types of calves based on their color, status, or lineage, even describing physical characteristics. Now, the classification system related to the calves gives us insight into how Sumerians classified and managed their livestock. That's what there's so many of these inscriptions that are like this, where a young calf with a yellow and black coat, with a black tail, a young calf with a white tail, the head of the herd. But they use the word sang, is the same word that we find where you get Sangiga. But let's move on.
So before we move on, I want to read some of the comments. So,
because I'm not looking at it.
Okay, yeah. So I see. So there's some things that I'm thinking about, right? So I see humanity came from Africa. I see in the Bible, Cush was the son of Ham, the father of what we call Nubia, Mesopotamia. This is a quote leading to the Old Testament. In other words, the Torah. I see the Cushites weren't Arab. Some people say Ptah said the first Arab, and he Sticks and Pole says, "Are you reading Sumerian text or a translation?" I think this is obviously a transliteration.
Well, yeah, this is a translation. Unless you want to read the transliteration. Oh, better yet, maybe you can just go to the inscription itself.
Yeah.
Because what I was reading was actually, this is my little translation of what it says. Now, you can go to the cuneiform dictionaries, or you can just put in this right here. You can just type in 001 PO 10677, and then it should that inscription should come up, and then you can it doesn't have a full translation of it. Maybe you can take it to an Assyriologist or Sumerologist that may be able to assist you on that.
For sure.
As previously stated, the word sang is not the only word for head, but also used to mean first, top, or foremost. And this term is also used as for priest. Nu sang, see, sang head, context is key. Here's another one. You have where they're giving you a number system right here where it's sang. Well, I'm not gonna do that.
And just so we're clear, is this is a Sumerian text, not a
No, this is everything that I'm going to pull up, unless otherwise stated. These are Sumerian inscriptions,
Okay.
and you can check these because I always give the name of the inscription and where you can find it.
Yeah.
So there's something called the Flood Story Composite, P469664, line 11. The first of the cities, Eridu, was given to Nudimud, the leader. And the word they have there is Mesh-sang. So, and it is, if you were to just do a search on that, go to ChatGPT. People are doing that now.
Because I'm trying to catch, because from the Sagiga, you said it is the Neo-Akkadian period that we get Sagiga, right?
No, what I'm saying was that in when the Akkadians had occupied Mesopotamia in the lower areas, they had a word, Zamak-Akkadi, which was the word that they had describing humanity, specifically for the peoples that they lived with, as far as we know, going back through the centuries. It wasn't until Sharukin had came and took it upon himself to start taking over the city-states. So what I was pointing out was, at that time, prior to the period during the time of Gudea in the third dynastic period, they had referred to themselves as Namlulu. Yeah. So what I'm saying was, with the example, it's clear that the Sumerians knew the difference between a black head versus a black skinned person. The following are a set of examples where Sumerians identified livestock and other items as completely black, rather than just a black head. And as you see, black bear, black sheep, black pig, black billy goat. All of these are inscriptions. Again, you can find these in administrative text during the Ur 3 period, P130263. Pull it up. The entire text corpus of Sumerian literature thus far has no examples of black being applied to a people or humans, which would be Namlulu. Or Nam, if you were to put it where black people, where you have Gi, which is black or night dark, you have Namlugi. So black people, black humanity, likewise with Namlu Babar, which would be white humanity or people. What did they say? They got black. Okay, where the white people?
So you're saying they never had either one of those ever?
No, they have not. I stand by that because with the years of my research in just this area alone, and I believe I have literally went through hundreds of these inscriptions, shared it with people, asked questions. I haven't found it. I haven't found it, and I challenge anybody to go looking. Maybe you can find it.
Look at this comment. This comment from Doravel. He said, "Black-skinned people are the first people, so wouldn't just using Sag be correct?"
Head or top? Well, if that were to be the case, you have to understand that Sag is a term that came after the fact. They refer to themselves in their inscriptions early on as Namlulu, which is humanity or people. Just like many indigenous peoples around the world, they have in their language the people. We the people. Aniyawiya, Cherokee, we the people.
So with that said, logically, do you see a scenario where, a black Sumerian or a dark-skinned Sumerian could have just used Namlulu while being black or dark-skinned?
Okay. Here's the thing. And I'm not trying to put it in absolutes. And I've always said this. I said this to my brother Zion Lex. I would expect that there were some black people in Mesopotamia with all the thousands of people that resided there.
Mhm.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But collectively, we don't find any mention of that from Sumerian aristocracy,
Hmm.
nor do we find it in any of the lower levels all the way down to slaves.
So
Not saying that black people would have been slaves. No, that's not what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah.
What I'm saying was that through the various levels of social status, we don't find anyone referred to that being black.
Okay, so I want to play some of Clyde Winters again, if you don't
Let me
mind,
stop sharing.
because he actually he went pretty deep with like what, because he is claiming that the royalty of Samaria was Cushite.
Okay.
Right, that's what he's claiming. So I want to play some of his evidence and see what your take is on that. Because like I said, Clyde Winters, you know, most people who deal with this stuff in terms of the Sumerians, they reference Clyde Winters. Like, he's probably one of the most popular ones. And even people were telling me, oh no, you got to have Clyde Winters on. You got to have Clyde Winters on because he's going to clear this up. Right. So I think it would be, we would not be doing this topic justice if we didn't present some of his data. So this is like, get this set up again, my OBS thing, and let me see if I can play. Not at even the front of Magnum Bowl. Wait, where was that at? But that was even here. Where did we leave off? Went off to there. Okay. So
origin of the Ki and Gi, Sumerians. But this is not strange at all. Oprah did not attack Rawlinson, who was still alive at the time, because he knew that Rawlinson said the Sumerians were the original Scythic and Turanian people. He called Cushites. You know, a lot of times when you read these things, they talk about the Scythic people. Now, today, they'll show you pictures of the Scythic people and say that they were white. No, that was another name for the Cushites. But again, like I said, is that unless you can find the terms, somebody brought that up in class this week. Unless you look at the original terms or names used by the ancient people, it would be very difficult to discover their true identity, you see, because they hide the identity. So you will not be able to see that these people were black, just like you, family, just like me, just like us. Moreover, Rawlinson made it clear that both the Akkadians and Sumerians were blacks. For Opar to have debated this issue with Rawlinson, who deciphered the cuneiform script, would have meant that he would have had to accept the fact that the Semites were black. There was no way Opar would have wanted to acknowledge his African heritage, given the anti-Semitism experienced by Jews living in Europe, of course. He didn't want to go around and say that his granddaddy was black. See? But see, they were able to whiten up. It's just like when I was growing up. You know, as I told you guys, you know, my mother was dark, my father was light. My mother and them, they were mainly from the Choctaw, my grandmother too, I think. But my father's side of the family was very light skinned, you know. And you know, they could pass, and some of them could even pass for white. And my auntie, Aunt Mabel, she couldn't pass for white, but she was very, 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 very beautiful. And they wanted her to play in movies back in the 30s. Very beautiful woman, you know. That's what spoiled me to always think about beautiful women. Anyway, I digress.
Let's move on.
The Sumerian Dravidian and African speakers originated in the Fertile African Crescent, yes, which were the highland regions of Middle Africa. These people belonged to the Ma clan. I'm going to talk about the Ma Confederation in the future. The Ma Confederation was the name of the major Paleo-African clan during the last great wet period in Saharan history, 5,000 to 3,000 years before Christ. The Ma Confederation includes the Egyptian, the Lamites, Dravidian, Manding, and Sumerians. We call members of this civilization Proto-Saharan to denote their ethnic origin. They added the term Ma. Remember, we talked last week about Ma and Ma to their ethnonyms. E.g., the Manding called themselves Minde, the children of Ma, and the Sumerians called themselves Mak Gari, exalted God's children. I discussed this great African civilization in my book, Before Egypt, the Ma Confederation, Africa's first civilization. The Sumerians were in control of Mesopotamia for many years. Then around 2334 BC, a group of Pontai speakers called Akkadians under Namr Sin, or Sargon of Agad, took over Mesopotamia. The most famous king of Sumer was King Gilgamesh. The first king to unify much of Sumer, though, was Misilim, who took the title King of Kish around 2500 BC. The second famous leader of Sumer was Gudea. That's supposed to be a depiction of Gudea on the right-hand side, but most of the time, most of the pictures of Gudea, they try to depict him, you know, as fake. You know, the French, they like to turn black people into white, and a lot of the artifacts that they show in their museums, are complete forgeries. They're just made up-ish. Okay, Gudea is the best known for his trade expeditions and unification of Sumer. He's also said to have obtained craftsmen from Susa and Elam for the decoration of temples for his people. Here's a picture of one of the great rulers, or Sargon. By 2380 BC, the Semitic people took control of Sumer. The Semitic speakers were led by Sargon the Great. It was Sargon who unified all of Sumer. Sargon, who had once been the cupbearer of the king of Ur, Zababa, one of the kings of Kish, he was also a great military leader and builder of the unified state of Sumer Akkad. The capital of Sargon's empire was Agade, Akkad of the Bible. And this is supposed to be a depiction of Sargon. I don't know. The Canaanites and Sumer. The fact that the Sumerians and the Chaldeans were Africoid or black is best indicated by the artworks from Ur, Tel Admar, or Eridu. Indo-European rulers of Lagash and Lhasa tried to imitate Sumerian styles, but many of them were Gudians, and therefore not of Kushite origin. It is interesting to note that the Mesopotamian king list does not recognize many of the Enseeds of Lagash. The Gudians ruled Lagash until Uthla-Higo, king of Erech, conquered Trigan, the last Gudian king. It's very important to understand that many of the Gudians, whenever you get a book, like if you did a Google search right now, they would show you some people with some big eyes. And these are not really Sumerians. The Sumerians look like you, they look like me, look like us. But these people, in a sense, because they're light-skinned and they were Gudians, and they didn't even rule Sumer, for an extended period of time. But they always put them in the books, these Gudians, and they say that these were the Sumerians. No, they're not. They're Gudians. They're recognized as white, barbarian people that lived in the mountains. The Canaanites invaded Mesopotamia from Arabia. They occupied Palestine and Phoenicia. In the ancient literature, the Canaanites were called Martu, or Amorites. The most famous Canaanite ruler of Mesopotamia was Hammurabi. Next slide. A lot of people, have seen the Sumerian handbag. Here we see some Sumerian supposed to be gods, and you see they carry this handbag. This handbag is very interesting. I just wanted to tell you what it means. The Sumerian gods and leaders are associated with a handbag. This handbag is made up of numerous Proto-Sumerian signs. The figures carry the bag with a hoop. See that hoop that's what they hold it with. The hook is connected to the bag by two circular signs, ta. You can see the two circular signs that connect the hook to the bag, which means ta. And the bag was shaped like a box. And the box in Proto-Sumerian is po. So thusly the handbag reads atata po. Or this is what that bag means. That handbag, when you read the signs that it's composed of, it reads, happiness unites the supporter of the pure mystic order. You see, in other words, as me and Reverend Dr. Masters has tried to tell you, is that First Frequency has always been a very religious people. We've always, in a sense, wanted to always stay in contact with our Creator, Amma, and then we've always, in a sense, wanted to recognize our relationship to a higher authority, and that's one of the reasons why they carry this handbag. This handbag relates to, in effect, the sense that they're supporters, but they're supporters of the mystic order or the code or the so-called religion. S.N. Kramer and the Sumerians claimed that Makan was Egypt, Meluha was Nubia Punt, and then this valley was Delmun. This is how S.N. Kramer and the Sumerians. This map kind of shows you Magan, which is Egypt, Meluha, which would be what we call modern Ethiopia, Somalia today, and then we see Sumer in Mesopotamia, then we see Dilmun was what we call the Indus Valley civilization. You see, and so a lot of people used to go to Dilmun because they used to like to go get lapis lazuli. And this is what made Dilmun famous. So as you can see, they always make you think that there was no connections among black people. Black people just isolated. Black people was just wandering, waiting for the white man to find them. No, that's a lie. We already had our civilizations. Most modern scholars such as Joanne Oakes in Babylon suggest that Magan, Egypto-Nubia, and Meluha Punt were southeastern Arabia and the Meccan coast to as far as the Indus Valley. In other words, a lot of times they want to say that Magan, Meluha, they want to take everything out of Africa and put it over in what they call Asia. It's all bullshit. What'd you say? It's all bullshit. Well, don't say that. It is. It's all a lie. From the time of Sargon the Great, 2334 BC, down to the first millennium BC, Magan and Meluha was Egypto-Nubia and Punt or Ethiopia, respectively. According to these records, ships from Meluha and Magan brought trade goods to Mesopotamia. We were not in isolation. We used to go on the sea. They teach you now, black people don't like to swim. Black people don't swim. They scared of the water. Oh, you're liars. We made the boats. We invented swimming. We invented, in a sense, riding on boats, building boats. And they teach you a lie. Next slide. Okay, but
All right, so I don't want to get too deep into the Fuente Magna stuff, but I just want to leave that on the screen for now, and I'm gonna bring our scholar Chuck Morgan back into the building. So, based upon what you just heard,
Whew. Well, I couldn't hear it. I just was reading along.
oh for sure,
There was so much that I want, because I started saying, let me, because one of the slides, I'm assuming that he presented as supposed to have been some Sumerian artwork, when that was clearly not.
going back
And he
to
does
the,
if you go back, there was like looked like porcelain.
right there,
I'm looking at my looking at the YouTube, so you probably
Canaanite
back.
consumer.
Yeah, that page.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that. I mean, Canaan. Yeah, we're familiar with Amartu and what the Sumerians regarded them as being savage creatures. They were built like monkeys, and they spoke not a language, and they sounded like dogs barking. And that they were uncivilized people. That description doesn't seem to match any of the known African societies that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But that's what they regarded the Guti as well as Amartu, because these two groups were part of the downfall of ancient Sumer. Wow, there's so much that I could use. That I debunked this stuff so many years ago with a number of different inscriptions. Let's deal with some of the things that he said. Okay, he made reference to this whole Cushite thing and Rawlingston and Obert and the crew.
Yeah.
What you have to understand, and this is something that I find to be the constant theme in the people who are advocating that the Sumerians were Black or Negroid. They rely heavily on documentation all the way back 100 years ago, as well as the Bible. That's where the problem comes in. That's the major issue.
So Genesis 2:13, right? That's the verse?
Say again?
The verse in Genesis 2?
Yeah. When they start talking about the Cush and all of this stuff, that's where the problem comes in. And this, if you go and look at how Rawlingston, as well as Jules Obert, as being Bible believers, all of these people based the root of this stuff on the Bible, because you got to understand also, knowledge of the Sumerian civilization wasn't what we see today. Well, what we generally see today is that ancient Sumer, or Mesopotamian as a whole, was a thriving, advanced civilization.
So I got it on the screen if you can't see it. This is Strong's Concordance of the Bible, and they're saying that Genesis 2:13, that Cush there refers to Ethiopia, according to Strong's Concordance. What is your take on that?
Okay, well, yeah, we can go back to the whole term for Ethiopia, of course, is identifying Cush because of what Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey spoke about when referencing that, as well as Herodotus when he starts talking about Ethiopia as being blackface and all this other stuff. What I was where I was going with this was that they relied on the Bible, where that famous passage in Genesis when it talks about in 8 and 9, 10, 8 and 9, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty hunter, one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore, it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. That's where it starts. Now, with the works of writers in the past who may have directly or indirectly planted the seeds that Kish was Cush.
Yeah.
That connection whereby, individuals who no doubt had good intentions, like Mother Drusilla Dungy Houston.
Yeah.
In her book, Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire, 1926. As well as George Cox, who made the following assertion. Cush colonized Mesopotamia around 2800 BC.
Yeah.
Cushite subjects now settled in Babylonia as overlords of Mesopotamia and introduced there what the world has since come to know as Babylonian civilization. That's in George. That was in African Empire and Civilization, George O. Cox. Cox offered no reliable evidence in support of that argument, and had the Cushites indeed colonized Mesopotamia, there should be there should be at least textual evidence, or at best some iconography. To date, there are none. I can give you a list of individuals, but I wanted, like, a man that I hold dear and sacred because of his work is the late Runoko Rashidi.
Yes.
In his book, Cushites, Origins of Sumer and Elam, on page 218, the early predominance of the lower Mesopotamian city, the Sumerians called Kish, one of those most ancient, may be another bond between the Sumerians and the Nile Valley. The Sumerian Kish is apparently only a modification of the Neolithic or Nilotic Kush, and thus reflects an unsevered connection between the two territories. Okay, I cited that, and then there's another individual I think you put in the video, a young lady who's deceased now, Catherine, I can't pronounce her last name, where she states that the oldest civilization in the world, Sumer, birthed the Egyptian civilization by
Ocholunu?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Egyptian, she said that the Sumer birthed the Egyptian civilization by 3100 BC. Well, the first king of Egypt was a Sumerian from the land of Nubia, sub-Saharan Africa. Sumer's first city was called Kish. Kish was established and ruled by Nimrod, the grandson of Ham. You see the pattern?
Yeah.
They're relying heavily on the Bible. Even Malachi York, in one of his books, the Black Book, Chapter 1, he makes a statement where he asks the question, is Kish the same as Cush or Cush of the Bible, Genesis 19:6? Yes. And you will also find Cush in the Bible long before the Cush of Noah's time, Genesis 2:13. Ta, Seti, Kish became Cush in the Bible. So am I sharing my screen?
Not yet. Only your avatar. You wanted to share that whole time?
Well, I mean, I can't, because I wanted to illustrate a point by delving into the inscriptions, because I think that's going to be this what we're about to go through now should dead that whole notion that Kish and Cush are the same, because this is where they get the concept that Cush is African by way of the name Kish.
So before we get to that point, I just want to set the groundwork in all regards, right? So we have a few comments here. So Doravel is asking, so you're saying the Bible ain't a good historical source? And with respect to this specific question, because I know that you've been stressing this whole time, most black people come from an Abrahamic tradition. So like when they think of Sumer Kush, they're thinking of these Bible verses. Now, if you're saying that, the Hebrew authors of the text got it wrong, many people who are following Abrahamic faith traditions, Christians, Hebrew Israelites, they'll say, I trust my holy book more than I trust, any type of Assyriologist or scholarship. And if this book says Cush and Strong says Ethiopia, that means that it's Ethiopia. So are you saying that they should just dump it?
No, and this is how I see it. I don't challenge you on that. If a person is comfortable, that is their comfort zone, I leave them in that. But for those who want to get specific and want documentation, want to get into the academics of it or the language of it, that's where I like to share what I've been able to uncover.
Okay. Okay.
I have yet to find any this. I'm going to toot my own horn on this one because this is
Yeah.
something that I did almost 2 years ago, just researching this stuff and looking at the name itself, and then I shared it with someone who had a thesis in in Kish, the language Kish, or not the language, the city-state Kish, and this person was very surprised by it and said, "Wow, that's really good," because they had never seen that. Being able to tie all of these in together, and we're going to walk through that because this is very important, and I think that anyone who holds the Bible as sacred, that's fine. I'm not challenging that. I don't want to disturb anybody's peace. But what I'm doing is I'm sharing what I've been able to uncover, that because people have made that association based on their religious convictions, they have unwillingly or unintentionally put out misinformation.
No,
And some people have dealt with that.
So with respect to that, so like if, and this is just hypothetically, if, you know, someone was to completely abandon, you know, historical scholarship, or not even consider historical scholarship, and only focus on the Bible, do you think it would be correct to consider the Sumerians black if you had a biblical perspective?
I mean, if you just put those blinders on and just completely walk away from anything other than the books of Genesis in this regard, then again, I'm not going to fight you on that. That's your comfort zone and that's your peace. Then walk with it. But for people who may have an open mind, who are willing to investigate and challenge the scholarship on it, they're going to be surprised to find that there are some things that are just not accurate that we may find in today's translations or even the Hebrew versions of the Bible.
Okay, now last thing before you share your screen, and let me know if you would rather go with the inscriptions of Kish before this. But this Macon and Meluha, according to Clyde Winters, Macon it would be Egypt or Kemet, and Meluha would be Punt. Would you have anything on that?
Well, yeah, that's pretty much well established in Assyriology on these various locations, because the consensus among Assyriologists and Sumerologists and archaeologists as well is that Dilmun stretched from the island of Falaka in the north of the Persian Gulf to the island of Bahrain in the south.
Okay.
Which that is what acted as the center for Dilmun. Dilmun and Macan, they're mentioned in the early cuneiform sea trade inscriptions. Meluha appears for the first time in an Akkadian inscription of Sargon. And Sargon boasts that the ships from Meluha, Magan, and Dilmun docked in his new capital of Agade, and the identification of Meluha with the greater Indus Valley is pretty much universally accepted.
So like Meluha is not ancient Punt, according to the evidence.
No. 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 Now this is something that came up on Brother Smash Rockwell's show.
Yeah.
That I did a presentation on this topic specifically, because there was a video that was put out where a good brother from out of California, who in a doctor of philosophy, Dr. Kevin Burrell. In his dissertation, he presented for the degrees of the Doctor of Philosophy. He stated that the ship was also observable in the archaeological record as polished. He outlines prior to 2600 BC and for the time following 1800 BC, including virtually the entire second millennium, the records of Indus Mesopotamian contact is not strong or weak. It is non-existent. Thus, the archaeological records that is available for this approximately 800 years stands out as a definite contrast to other periods. In other words, this is what he said, on page 134. In other words, between 2600 and 1800 BC, there is strong archaeological and textual evidence for contact between Maluha of the Harappian culture and Mesopotamia.
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
But previously or subsequent to this interval, the evidence is entirely lacking.
You should share
What?
your screen real quick, because I think you're.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna get into, so like you said, Maluha is Indus Valley. Magan is not Kemet. Magan is not Kemet.
Oh, well, see, now we got to go into that, because then we're going to have to go and deal with what the Neo-Assyrians had. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, you gotta share your screen because you're going a little deep.
Yeah,
a little
because,
deep.
yeah.
And after this, we're gonna transition to the other sources. We're gonna be dealing with Hermstein and Asar. So let me, Burrell is a really good scholar out of UC Berkeley.
Yeah. And I appreciate his work. It's excellent. So as I was reading in the latter part, what is observed instead from about the middle of the second millennium BC is a shift in the geographic location of Maluha in the ancient sources, wherein Maluha no longer refers to a region to the east, but a location in Africa. Now that's important, because if Maluha, this is it. If Maluha referred to areas east of Mesopotamia in the third millennium BC, but in the middle of the second millennium BC referred to a region in East Africa, it is obvious, therefore, Gelb writes that some kind of a shift in the location of Makan and Maluha must have taken place between the earlier and later times. This evidence is seen in the textual sources, as John Hansman notes reference to Maluha as an eastern region disappeared from contemporary Mesopotamian texts at the beginning of the second millennium BC. Sources, well, you can see the source. Let me get to the point. And the point
is a switch over, basically.
Well, yeah, and there's a reason for that, because these are just various inscriptions that mentions how this Maluha village was literally in Sumer. Right here. Here is there are no known sources from Kish, Nubia, or Ethiopia arriving in Mesopotamia under the Sumerians or Akkadians. So these people here, I'm using my cursor in this script, these are people identified as Maluha. Right here. And they go before an individual here, and based on that, the way he's dressed, that's during the Akkadian period. Gudea of Lagash spoke about the people of Magan and Maluha who came to Sumer with precious woods. The Elamites came to him from Elam. The Susians came to him from Susa. Magan and Maluha loaded wood from their mountains upon their shoulders for him, and to build the house for Ngirzu, they gathered for Gudea in his city Nirsu. Like I said, I did a presentation on that, but I want to get right down to something that the brother was pointing out, because this is something that when people, and in particular, Clyde Winters had mentioned, here we go. He mentioned Samuel Kramer. A minority view on this topic, such as Dr. Samuel Kramer, in his book, The Sumerians, he maintained that the country Maluha from the earliest time referred to an African location in Nubia or Ethiopia. Most of today's scholars, archaeologists, and Assyriologists, however, emphasize that the evidence unequivocally points to two Maluhas, one eastern, the other western. See the critiques of Kramer, singular Maluha theory by his peer or contemporary, I.J. Gelb. I think that the way that it was put, that what we read with Brother Samuel, was that Gelb was agreeing with the whole Makan and Maluha as being an African thing.
Yeah.
So a contemporary of Dr. Samuel Kramer and an elite Assyriologist, Professor Ignace J. Gelb, challenged Kramer's claims from the 25th International Congress of Orientalists in Moscow back in 1960. because Kramer, I think you put that out in 1959, or in 19. Well, he had challenged it in 1970. Okay, so there's a singular location for Makan and Maluha. His critiques in Makan and Maluha in early Mesopotamian sources, Gelb mentions Ethiopia and black people, men, as a sarcastic jab at Kramer's arguments, which may have led to individuals like Clyde Winters and others taking Gelb's words. So, talk too loud? Okay. Jacobson and Samuel Kramer all agree that there is no good reason to assume that Makan and Maluha were differently located in the earlier periods than in the later periods, when the identification of Makan and Egypt and of Maluha with Nubia or Sudan, Ethiopia, admittedly rests on clear and firm evidence, page 1. Now, thus weighing the evidence offered by the text, according to which the Sargonic king Rimush conquered the countries of Parasham.
Did you change
Zah-
slides? Because I think you were on the previous slide.
What do you mean?
'Cause
Oh, I didn't change?
Yeah, you didn't
Oh,
change
yeah.
slides. Professor Gelb. And
Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, so the purpose of this is what Gail writes. The purpose of this note is to present some of my ideas on the location of Makan and Maluha in the earlier periods, ideas which I have freely expressed in classes and scholarly discussion, and which are now beginning to appear in print. Kramer also proposed to locate Dilmun in the Indus Valley, a proposition which clashes hopelessly with the generally accepted, and as far as I'm concerned, ironclad identification of Dilmun with classical Tyrus and the modern Bahrain Islands. This is coming from his book. I'm just citing this, and then I'm going to hit it with the bomb. These are my conclusions in respect to the location of Makan and Maluha. Makan is the southern shore of the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. It denotes Arabia, extending east from ancient Sumer up to and including Orman. Maluha is the northern shore of the Persian Gulf and of the Arabian Sea. It denotes Iran and India, extending east of the ancient Alam and Anshan up to and including the Indus Valley. As for Makan, the evidence based on conquest by Sargonic kings also indicates the closeness of Makan to Mesopotamia. Let me go right there. Okay, so what Samuel Kramer said, this is what because I saw Clyde Winters in one of the chat groups, and he was citing this, and this is what we kind of got into a little conflict. Okay, so 4 pieces of evidence based on conquest place Maluha close to Mesopotamia, specifically in Iran, east of, well, we just read that part. But let's get in reading Gelb's 8-page critique of Kramer's views on Maluha. He offers evidence which supports the consensus that Makan and Maluha were initially nearest to Mesopotamia, refuting Samuel Kramer's Black Ethiopian view. In post-Sumerian periods, we find Maluha mentioned several times as a place of black men, which leads naturally to an identification of Maluha with Ethiopia. That's in the Sumerians by Professor Samuel Kramer on page 277. The post-Sumerian period would be during the Neo-Assyrian period. The Neo-Assyrians were not Sumerians. The Neo-Assyrian Empire was created through military conquest, political techniques, and cultural influence. They used iron weapons, siege tactics, and skilled archers to conquer many city-states and kingdoms in ancient Mesopotamia. They used the cuneiform style of writing, and their inscriptions have contributed to this confusion. More on that in a minute. So on pages 7 and 8, Gelb challenges Kramer and other scholars with a set of questions regarding the African Makan and Maluha locations. Scholars who still are inclined to consider the location of Makan and Maluha in Egypt and Nubia in the early periods of Mesopotamian history should stop and try to answer the following questions. Can the conquest of Makan and Maluha by early Mesopotamian rulers referred to the conquest of Egypt and Nubia?
Hmm.
That's something to think about when you
Yeah.
study the history on that, on who was conquering Egypt.
Yeah.
Now, the answer would have to be no. At least two Akkadian kings, Remish and Naram Sin, conquered the areas of Parushim and Elam. These countries, as well, resided near Mesopotamia, near Iran, with Maluha to the southeast in the Indus Valley, not to the west in Egypt and Kush, Ethiopia. Here, Professor Daniel A. Boxberg. He makes the point that Elam he conquered, and the burial mound of the site of the town he heaped up over them. Furthermore, the foundations of Parushim from the country of Elam he tore out, and so Remish, king of the world, rules Elam as a god. Enki showed him by the gods to say. Got to my point. Now, Sin, the mighty king of the world, quarters before victor of the 9 battles for 1 year after the battles, those he was victorious. Furthermore, there 3 kings he captured, and before Enlil he had them brought in. And Magan he conquered, and Manuhim, the lord of Magan, he captured. In their mountains, diorite stone he quarried, and Agade, his city, he brought it, and a statue of himself he created to the god he dedicated. Now let's examine the inscriptions that brought about the confusion in this typologic adjustment from the Neo-Assyrian periods. Now, this is kind of technical, and I'm not gonna. And maybe if somebody go to Smash Rockwell's channel, you can find the whole presentation. But what's important for the people who are watching to realize is that when you're talking about this is long after the Sumerian periods. Okay, so when they're talking about the black men of Maluha, this and that Samuel Crane is making mention of, this is long after Sumer, after the Akkadian, and after the Gupta rule. On my first campaign, I marched to Makan, Egypt, and Maluha, Ethiopia. As for Taharka, the king of Egypt and Kush, whose defeat Ashurhadan.
Do we see it on the screen? Because I don't see it on the screen.
You don't see it?
Yeah, I don't see it.
Hold up. Let me see.
It's like a blank screen.
It's a blank screen?
Yeah.
Wow.
Or it's a screen with
yeah,
lines.
I can see the outline, but I don't see the text itself. And I wanted folks to see that. But let me just move on. What we were just reading, beginning in line 51, was how the king Ashurbanipal, in his first military campaign against King Taharka of Egypt, the names of the lands mentioned in the opening are Makan, Maluha, Musur, and Kuushi. Now, when you look at these things up, you can put it up in these databases that do these translations. He says that I marched to Makan, and then, for instance, they put Egypt and Maluha, Ethiopia. As for Taharka, the king of Egypt and Kush, whose defeat Asarhaddon, king of Assyria. I don't even see it. It's not even, I see the outline, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I see the
That's
first,
unfortunate.
like the yellow outline above it. I mean,
Yeah,
could you maybe change the backgrounds? Is that possible? Or do a
Change the
screenshot?
background?
Yeah, like if you change the background to white instead of black, if the text is black.
Oh no, the text is white.
Oh, the text is white. Yeah, but I don't even see the text on.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of my filter. Maybe it's let me check to
Okay.
see if it's the filter.
Okay, while you're doing that, let me make this point. Maluha doesn't come up again until.
Oh, there it is. It was the filter the whole time.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna go back to that.
Yeah, go back to some of maybe the previous slides if people want to get
Okay,
a view of that.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we see it way better once I took
Yeah.
off that filter.
All right. Cool. All right. So let me see here. Let's go to the Royal Monumental Inscription.
Actually, all of your slides look better.
Oh, thank you much. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. So here you can see, if you look, and I put it in the underneath, I put it in the line here, where you have Kor Makan. This is Neo-Assyrian. Kor Maluha. And you have Musor, which is what they use for Egypt. And you have Kuusi, and that's what they identify Cush in Neo-Assyrian writings. All right. Now, what we were just reading in the beginning, I was pointing out in line 53, was how Ashurbanipal, in his first military campaign against King Taharka of Egypt, the names of the lands mentioned in the opening are Makan, Maluha, Musur, and Kuusi. Maluha doesn't come up again until column 3, 103. Below, where the scribe speaks of King Ashurbanipal's second campaign and those he's installed in Elam, Gutium, Amaru, and Maluha. I'm losing my voice. So where it says, moreover, as for, let me try, a fugitive who had gassed the feet of my royal majesty, whom I installed as king in the land Elam, as well as the kings of the land Gutium, the land of Amaru, and Maluha, they put in parentheses, Ethiopia, whom I had installed as rulers by command of the gods, Ashur and the goddess Melusu. He, Shamakum, made all of them become hostile towards me, and they sided with him. When we check the words for King Ashurbanipal's predecessor, King Ashurhadan, we begin to see an evolution in the place names used. In King Ashurhadan's 8th inscription, we find Kuusi, Cush. However, the country of Maluha isn't connected to the name country of Cush yet. If you go down to line 27, you can see Tarku, Kor, Kuusi. And I put that in the red outline where you had Taharka, the king of Cush.
Yeah.
So it was during this period that the direction and the location of Maluha changed from what the Sumerians and the Akkadians identified it as. And during the Neo-Assyrian period is where it changed. Then, for no apparent explanation, the king of Ashurhadan, 16th inscription, we find the country of Maluha mentioned alongside the country of Musur, Egypt. Ashurhadan, chosen by the god Ashur, my lord, a good Shidu, which is in Egypt and Maluha. Right there. That's where it changes.
So it's the Assyrian
The Neo, yes, under Ashurhadan, where this thing changes.
So when Clyde is associating Maluha with Egypt, he is following after this Neo-Assyrian king.
Exactly, but he as a source to make it impactful, he's using Samuel Kramer's idea on that. And in doing so, Samuel Kramer and his this conflict between he and Gelb, that conflict was between them. And as far as the world of academia, Gelb was pretty successful in establishing that there were two Maluhas, one during the Sumerian period, Akkadian period, and then it shifted during the period under Neo-Assyrians. That's what the brother Samuel, I can't remember his name, the brother was mentioning earlier.
Philip Shock.
He was talking about how that there were two. In his 20th inscription, we see Kor, Mashur, Egypt, and then you have Upper Egypt, and then you have Cush mentioned. The place of Ashurhadan, mighty king, king of the world, king of Assyria, governor of Babylon, king of Sumer and Akkad, king of the kings of Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, and Cush, king of Assyria, descendant of Sargon II, king of Syria.
So you would say that even the Assyrians, they associated Cush with Kish. Do I have that right?
They associate, yeah, because by that time they had already had direct contact with them.
So this is the thing that I'm thinking about, like, because we have Herodotus, right? We have Hebrew writers, we have the Assyrians. Is it that the Greeks and the Hebrews were borrowing from the Assyrians? Because what is the chance that they would make the same mistake, in associating, Sumeria with Cush?
Very little, because that's exactly what happened, and that's where a number of biblical scholars have put on record that they mistakenly got Kish mixed up with Cush. And that's where the problem came in, where 20th century people, scholars who, like I said, may have meant well, but they were following the biblical narrative,
Which
and
is the
some of the
Assyrian narrative.
basing it on the change in direction that the Neo-Assyrians had brought about.
Well, do we know why they did that?
I don't know why they did it. Okay, I don't know why they did it. I think I even put that something like that was in in this article. Here we see the country of Cush. The country of Cush has now become the country of Maluha. In Ashur-Hadan's 34th inscription, we see the standard use of the second Maluha. In my 10th campaign, the god Ashur had me take and made me set out to Magan and Maluha, which are called Cush and Egypt in their native tongue. I mustered the vast troops of the god Ashur, who are in Nisanu, the first month. I think that's a Hebrew name or something similar to that. I set out from my city Ashur and crossed the Tigris and Euphrates rivers when they were at flood level, and marched over difficult mountains like a wild bull. The point here is this toponym location differs from the well-known and attested identification of Maluha by the Sumerians and Akkadians. This Maluha was changed from the old location to that of Africa. When exactly the change came about isn't exactly known specifically. However, it took place in the time of the Neo-Assyrians, as the evidence shows. In Ashur's 35th inscription, we see Kuusi Maluhai. The translation correctly has Cush, however, black, which is not in the inscription. This is the root of the claim black Maluchians in line 4. In other words, the use of black here is not in the inscription, which would be found as Salamu. Okay. What I would like to do, if I can, I want to stop there. And because this ties in to another article that I put out that I did on Brother Garfield show.
Before you do that, can you put your presentation back up and like quickly scroll through it, because the previous slides were under the filter, and I just want everybody just to quickly see each slide for like a few seconds.
All right, no problem. Give me a second. Did I share it?
Not yet. I still see the avatar.
Oh wait a minute, my fault. Okay, where is it?
Because it's just
that's it.
It's just so much clearer now. So if you can go back to the very top and then just scroll through, just so they
wait to the very top of this?
And just like scroll through for a few seconds, because it's way more clearer. And I just want them to see everything that you went over. And you can give some commentary briefly if you want.
Well, there were a number of archaeologists and scholars who did do excavations and in the field work in these specific lands, and they put out their analysis, which supports Gelb's contention that there were two Malukas. And then just what I was showing earlier, like in Simon Parpola, in his writing, which one is this? This is from Yeah, the Maluha village. And yeah, hold on, I'm trying to find out.
As you
where
can see,
which
this
one.
is I mean, I've never seen a Sumeria presentation that's this extensive. This is
Oh.
intense.
um, what they were showing is in various inscriptions, and as you can see, because I guess when we keep this up, I'm have to somehow be able to work it to where I can put the all of this information to where it's readily available, other than just looking at the stream and then just writing it down.
Yeah.
But what was clearly evident was that there was definitely a Malucha village in Sumer. How did the Mesopotamians communicate with the Maluchans? Via the system of trade. The Akkadians even had an interpreter of the Malucha village. In an inscription, the interpreter called the interpreter of the Malucha language, this cylinder depiction shows a language interpreter sitting on the lap of an Akkadian or god or king interpreting for the Maluchans, bringing tribute.
Hmm.
He would need an interpreter because Maluchans did not speak Akkadian. Shul Ilishu, interpreter of the Maluchan language, this indicates that the Maluchan language was not widely understood in Mesopotamia, and that some Maluchan speakers took local names, in his case, a typical Semitic language. Semitic name. This is, you can go to the Louvre Museum. This is Shu Ilishu, interpreter of the Malucha language. It's right there, this particular inscription. Now, this, what we see here, hold on. This is that cylinder seal. You have this individual's either a king or a god, and this little person here as an interpreter, and these people are identified in the inscription as being of Malucha. Now, again, this they identify Malucha with people of the Indus Valley civilization, who did have extensive trade with Mesopotamia, be it Akkadians or Sumerians.
So those are Dravidians, basically.
I don't know, but I get thrown off with Dravidian because there's so many different types of people of India. Some people would say Harappian. There's a number.
Yeah, because I've been doing some research, and even though it's not conclusive, scholars consider Dravidians as the most likely candidate for the Indus Valley and Harappan civilization.
Okay. The earliest attestation of Malucha can be found in the inscription of Sharukin, Akkadian, for which you have Sargon, referring to Maluchan ships, and when they docked at the capital of the city of Agade. The inscription of the kings of Agade, column 5 and 6, University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, Museum Journal X. I don't know Roman numbers. But inside here is pretty clear that you can see that the ships of Malucha, the ships of Magan, the ships of Dilmun, he collected unto the quay in the front of Agade. So they were already traveling in Mesopotamia, these people. Yeah, the Malucha village. You can get this book by Simon Parpola and I think Alfred Parpola, where they go through various inscriptions where you can see them mentioning the son of Malucha. You see Dumu, Meluha Dumu is son in Sumerian. You know, it's well documented. It's very well documented. Urlama, the son of Malucha, has to encompass 41 pounds of wool, the balance of 2 talents, 50 pounds of wool loaned to him in a year, in which the temple of Parush Dagan was built. So these people were actually helping to build in some of the trade, and even had a little village. Ugula Malucha, the overseer Malucha, Altogether, 6 men servants from the goddess Nanshi, overseer Maluha. It gives you a list of persons.
So you
All
would
of this-
basically you would discount, like, if Maluha's in Indus Valley, you would discount the idea that the Sumerians were Dravidian or any type of Indian.
Yeah, because well, number one, they had already had trade with these people, and they had even some artifacts that you can. Let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, you can even they even had, although the evidence that the Indus Valley groups traveled, traded, and settled in designated areas of the Sumerians and Akkadians, no direct evidence of Sumerians in substantial groups traveling directly to the coastal and plains of the Indus Valley has been uncovered. You're familiar with this. This
Yeah.
is at the Ashmolean Museum at the University of Oxford, and then you look at the one. This is what was excavated in Kish,
Yeah.
and then you have this Pakistani in a national museum in Karachi. It's not. They were definitely in communication with each other, but they were not the same people.
They differentiated. And you would say the same is the case because the Uruk people traded with pre-dynastic Kemet, and the invading pharaonic race theory is based upon the idea, and Kofi the Black Critique put it in the chat. Hebrew Israelites, they try to claim that Sumer is older than Kemet. The Uruk period traded with pre-dynastic Kemet, invading pharaonic race theory, right? But what would you say is the relationship between the Uruk and Sumer?
Okay, I'm gonna hit that in a minute, but I
sure.
wanted to finish this last part
For sure.
from a article that I did. Okay, let me see.
For sure, feel free.
All right. Now this is where this is my own research. I take credit for it, and I shared it with a couple of Assyriologists who did like it. Because to my knowledge and to their knowledge, it had never been done before. So, other than his interpretation of the Genesis quotes, York offers no documentation from any Kish inscription supporting his teachings. This is a stone plaque discovered at Mari in the early Dynastic III period. I try not to get caught up in the color thing, but just looking at what we refer to as the standard from Mari, Kish, Sumer, Eridu, they had this they had this typical phenotype. We call it the standard of well, I guess this would help in that argument as well. Before I get down to what I was able to pull up in a publication by the noted scholar Professor Yingel Levin in University of Israel, in his book Nimrod the Mighty, King of Kish, King of Sumer and Akkad, July 2002, on pages 33, 51. He offers some interesting and compelling research work on the identity and origins of Nimrod and the Cush narratives. In his abstract, he said the intent of this paper is to examine the story of Nimrod in Genesis 10, 8 through 12, offering fresh insight on both the historical background and the literal development of the passage. The article deals first with the passage's literal meaning, syntax, and the extant text. The geographical context of the passage is shown to be distinctly Mesopotamian. Nimrod being the builder of Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and other Sumerian cities, and then moving north to Assyria. After surveying previous attempts to identify an historical Nimrod, the author then suggests that the biblical figure is modeled after the combined traditions about Sargon of Akkad and his grandson Naram-Sin. Nimrod is the son of Cush. Sargon began his royal career at Kish right after the flood. Sargon Naram-Sin traditions reached the Levant during the second millennium BCE, being combined by the time and distance into the composite personality. The tradition reached its final form during the reign of Sargon II of Assyria, who added such themes as hunting to the story. The later editors of the book of Genesis dropped much of the story, and the Nimrod tradition was thus lost to later generations, save 5 remaining verses in the 10th chapter of Genesis. He states that the biblical Nimrod then is not a total counterpart of any one historical character. He is rather the composite Hebrew equivalent of Sargonic dynasty, the first mighty king to rule after the flood. Later influence modified the legend in the Mesopotamian tradition, adding such details as the hero's name, his territory, and some of his deeds, and most important, his title, King of Kish. The later editors of the book of Genesis dropped much of the story and mistakenly identified the Mesopotamian Kish with the Hamitic Cush. The Nimrod tradition was thus lost to later generations, save 5 remaining verses in the 10th chapter of Genesis.
Wow.
Now, this is where it gets interesting. While researching the claims by Cush advocates in preparation for this PowerPoint, as it relates to the name Cush, I've discovered some impactful information that I'd like to share with this audience. That there are 3 keywords found in cuneiform sources and literature relevant to this topic, with 2 being homophonous, 2 words, signs spelled differently but pronounced the same, and they are, as what you see here, Kish, Cush, and Cush 2. Now, of course, with this little mark here, we don't. This is what Assyriologists use when you find several words that have the same spelling in English when the transliteration. So they put Kish 1, Cush 2.
Yeah.
So if you look here, you see Kish, right? Then you see Cush, and then you see another sign for Cush. Evidence that this Cush is in no way the Cush of the Bible can be found in column 1 of a Sumerian administrative inscription, where we see Cush and Cushim together having totally different meanings when we read the context. I don't think I put that down there. Okay, here we go. So the Unicode number 12187. First, we have Kish, defined as totality. Okay, and its attestation can be found in an administrative text, TS 0881, dating to the early dynastic period A, and the catalog sources, of course, what you see here. The second attestation is in the early dynastic 3A in Sharupak, administrative text. Nothing regarding this word can be linked to the biblical Cush, nor the toponym Cush. Now, in the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative, CDLI, the catalog number P011 or 011050, in the openly rich annotative cuneiform corpus, or ORAC, you'll see Kish in this particular text. Where is it? Right here. So the Unicode number we have for Cush. Now this is where it gets interesting, because we do find the word Cush in Mesopotamia. The name Cush is there. All right, so Cush here was used as a determinative, by the way. It's a determinative, and it's used before the names of leather items, animal hides, and for the record, this Cush can be found in numerous texts. My focus here is how it's being used in conjunction with the word Gigi.
Yeah.
Which together, Cush Gigi means black skin.
Black skin.
Got it?
Yeah.
All right, so wait a minute. So the word for skin here, Cush, is used as a determinative, a classifier for skin. So when a person is reading that, you don't pronounce Cush, but you know that by that time when you're reading the inscription, that what is to follow is referencing skin.
Skin, yeah.
All right, so skin, leather, or body. However, Cush Gigi describes black skin for specific animals and not people. Certainly, if the Sumerians, in this case the scribes of Kish, wanted to say they were black-skinned people, they would have simply written it in the text, but they didn't. This word combination is only found on a Babylonian tablet and not from a Kish text. The primary publication, ASJ 09, lines 1 to 2, has the following: Cush Gigi, black leather. The text mentioning this, for example, has a list of various items: leather goods, livestock, metals. Nothing in the text is mentioning human beings having black or brown skin, nor does it ever mention Cush. For greater detail of this text, refer to what the digital corpus of cuneiform lexical text. And I put that there so you can, because you can't copy and paste it, you just have to write it down.
Yeah.
Now, here is, this is coming from that database, Oric. Now, if you look closely, right here, you see Cush, right?
Mm-hmm.
In column 1.
Yeah.
All right, now if we look at the translation, we got gazelle skin, Cush Mashda, skin of young gazelle, mountain goat, fallow deer skin, stag skin, bison skin, etc., etc. You get the point.
Yeah.
You know it is Cush, 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 Cush. Got it?
Yeah.
All right. Now, when we get down to black leather, we see Cush Gigi. Black leather. Cush Su'a, red leather. Where's the black people?
On the back of my mind, I want to pull. What if I pulled like one of Reggie's cards? Even though I know he wouldn't play this, but what if I said the people are the cattle, and that's what they meant? The people are
The cattle?
Yeah.
Well, if they were talking about the cattle, then they would have simply identified the cattle. We have bison skin. We have
Yeah.
wild sheep skin. You even have mongoose skin, mouse skin.
But is there any Sumerian text where they connect people with any of these animals?
As far as identifying, well, I mean, you have people that are as being courageous, having the courage of the bull as they go into battle.
Yeah.
You have these metaphors, but specifically being a people. Say you were to pick hypothetically a name of a group of people. Say you say the Akkadians, they were like the black bull of Agade, something like that. No, they don't have it like that.
And it's difficult for me to make that, like, you know, honestly, because you don't have the attestation of them being referred to as Gigi, so it kind of makes it tough to make that.
Well, that's why when I put this in your bag, I give the reader the opportunity to go and check it.
Yeah.
So if they go to the Oric, you can put it up right in the search, and you can pull up every attestation of it. If you go to the electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian dictionary and tap in, say a name, you'll find it. Every attestation of it is there.
Yeah.
You go to the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, you'll find it there as well. In this case, you see the numerous references with the determinative Cush.
With Cush.
Now, what did I give it as an example here? As with the cat, its tongue that treats its skin. And you see Cush here again. They're making reference to skin. Now, if we go forward, finally, because as we went earlier, I pointed out that you had Kish, which is in the northern area of Mesopotamia, and then you have two words. There's really three words, but these two are the most abundant. So you have Cush and you have Cush 2. Now, one that we know is identified as what? Totality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kish.
But what we were getting to, as we go a step further, is that Finally, there's the verb kushtu, which means to become tired, fatigued, exhausted, to be out of breath. In Anna, while shutting up the tigi and adab instruments in their homes, you never grow weary with admirers looking at you. The Sumerian term there is kushtu. This is not a determinative. This is specifically a word used to denote someone being fatigued or tired. But the word that we have pronounced, at least what we know from these texts, is kush.
See, I could see the way that a folk etymologist could play with this because, you know, in Kemet, they use Hesi to define Kush in certain periods of time, which meant like wretched or like a classical version of the N word. So like here, if you have Kush meaning weary and tired, I could see how somebody could try to tie those things together and say that Hesi for Kush is the same as Kush for tired in Sumerian.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that's how the game can be played.
Yeah.
So Kush is another word that, although it shares a similar pronunciation as Kush, the two have zero to do with the ancient people of North Africa or the Bible. The few people still holding that position, their claims are unfortunately lack substantive support. Because the two may sound similar, doesn't indicate a relationship. There's also so many possible sounds and combinations of sounds humans can make. And since each language uses only a small fraction of these, we tend to make words from foreign languages sound more like words in our own than they would be. Similarities in names and words are in many cases coincidental and may not show any support, historical, etymological, or cognitive connection. So I wanted to make sure that this is clear. We know that in ancient Mesopotamia, they had a word, they did have a word Kush. Unfortunately, it doesn't connect with a people. It only identifies one as a determinative in inscription, which is identifying it as being skin. The one passage that we have for black leather, or black skin, if you will, is making reference to leather, as well as red leather.
So they defined the skin of animals, they just didn't define it for humans.
Well, that's the thing. They refer to themselves as Namlulu. And that is how they identified themselves. After the Akkadian period, under the reign, or at least in Lagash, the governor, or king, some people say, Gudea, he then starts to use it as a reference to the people, as being the people who were sheep for his god Gersu and his warrior Enlil.
And what was the connotation behind him using that phrase for blackhead? Like, why did he use that in that context?
Okay, what we pointed out earlier was how that was what the Akkadians used.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see if I just have to start.
Because it seems kind of weird that they would use that phrase. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it kind of leads me to my next question of like, were they dark? Is that why he used that phrase?
Well, yeah. Let's walk through that, because a lot of people have a tendency to want to use that as being the basis for saying, and I still don't understand it, because they don't have. There's nothing that is used similarly to identify people that way. Or I'll give you an example. I'm gonna walk. Well, this is where we left off at.
Yeah.
Okay. So I pointed out that, for example, after example, it's clear that the Sumerians knew the difference between a black head versus black skinned person. The following are a set of examples where the Sumerians identified livestock and other items as completely black rather than having just a black head. You have black beard, black sheep, black pig, black billy goat, black garments. The entire text corpus of Sumerian literature thus far has no examples of black being applied to a people or humans, which would be Namlugi.
Namlugi.
But we don't find this term. I put this because I just did this myself. And nor do we find Namlu Babar, because Babar is what they use for white or light or sun sometimes. This is important. Where are we going at? I want to get right to the point. When you can use this too. When you take the when you put the nouns Dumu Sun and Sang head together, you end up with a compound Dumu Sang firstborn or head in context, because context is key. And this is, you look at Lugal Dalu, make him Sang Babar. And the reason I made Sang Babar whitehead is because this statue, I think, is porcelain, something like that.
Yeah.
But he has a pale. Is he a whitehead? Is he a black? I don't get it. They don't say it. They don't describe him like that. Well, you can see how this sign Geek or Geek 2 does this logogram. It gives you a whole thing and how it's used. Geek is one of the most attested forms to the Earth 3 period. There's a degree of interchangeability between the reading of MI as Geek 6, Ku 10, me, made to me. This word Geek is the straighter verb to be. And let's get all technical. But what I was trying to establish.
That gig doesn't necessarily mean black in that context. Is that what that was?
Where is that?
When you said gig, because I was reading like gig is to be. But
well, as being depending on how it's used as a noun. I mean, as a verb to be.
Yeah.
See, so
Yeah.
gig to giga, as it turns into an adjective. If you bypass this, okay, Sumerians had the Sumerians had a word for ebony, and this was Essi. In this case, for example, you see the determinative Nish. Essi is a brown tree, because this right here, Nish, is a determinative letting you know the word to follow it is a tree. Well, it will be, in this case, a color, which is a brown tree, located in the mountainous areas. This word has never been attributed to the skin of the Sumerians, nor is there documentation of the Sumerians using it to describe their own skin or anyone else's skin. From the ebony mountains, I will have ebony trees brought for you, the building of Ngersu's temple, Gudea, Cylinder A and B. Debunking the misinformation. This is when I started getting on the messing with people online, because people say, well, when they're talking about Sagiga having black head, they're talking about hair. Okay, now some have speculated that this word Sangiga was in reference to the hair, which I believe is a misleading conclusion. Misleading because the general word for hair, fur, is suki. Siki. Siki. The Babylonians refer to as Sikipa, hair on the head. You see?
Yeah.
All right, releasing the hair to flow down the back. Saba, well, that's what that, you can always pull this up.
Yeah.
All right. The god Sharamu, and these are missing lines, his hair, 3 years without seeing it, Lugal, the house of Ur. It's missing some, but I think it's pretty well established that they use the Sumerian word Siki. Su is a direct reference to hair. You have Sikigu, Sikisugu, Sikisuudgu, or Mu. My removed hair, my thin hair, my combed hair, my hair. Sources, examples, digital corpus of cuneiform lexical text. All you gotta do is put in Siki, and you'll pull this up. Okay, when searching various social media platforms, Facebook, topic of Black Sumerians is gaining traction. One individual argued that the Sumerians wore afros because Siki has been used to mean wool. One writer made the odd claim that the hat Gugeo of the Gash War, this is Herstein, was symbolic of an afro.
Do you have time to play some of his content because we were like
I don't have it on. I don't have it. In
I
front of
have it. I have it in the background if you want to play it.
Oh, if you well, when he was saying that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, not with him saying that, but with him going into like different things that he believes about the Sumerians.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
But let me I just wanted to get to it in this up real quick. But my overall point was that Sagiga does not contain syllable siki for hair. Therefore, it's a stretch to conclude that Sangidi or Sangiga meant hair or clump of hair or locks. Because somebody said it means
That means the dreads. Yeah.
All right. Even it was something else. Even I got from Reggie was that even the Neo-Assyrians offered a vivid description of the people of Cush. In every reference to the Sumerians by the Neo-Assyrians, never are they referred to as Cushites, nor black people. In a fragmentary cuneiform text, we read the following: his wives, his son, and his daughters, whose bodies like his have black skins like asphalt, bitumen. Now people say this deep. They say that the Neo-Assyrians are black.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real fast. So I was just using these different terms or these different points to illustrate where I was coming from. So you had the black-headed seagull. You had a brown-headed cowbird. You had the black raven. Okay, the Sumerians were very specific, and they categorized, compartmentalized everything that they had, and they documented everything. So if they wanted to, even the redhead, if they wanted to say that there was a black head, then they would have. They had white sheep, they had black sheep. They mention them. Everything is mentioned by name. So when you say that the Sumerians saw themselves the blackhead, is this what they're talking about? That's a blackhead, but we don't find any artwork among the Sumerians.
But just so that we're clear, because we're talking about this being in the Neo-Akkadian, or is it Neo-Assyrian?
Which one?
The Sagiga.
Sagiga came. Okay, let me go further down because
Okay,
I think
for
I
sure.
know where you're going with this.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
this is important because of all the. Here we go. Let me pull it up right here. All right. So first of all, the word used to describe humanity as found in Sumerian inscription was Namlulu, a word found 5 different times from the early dynastic B period, 3B period, 13 times in the Ur 3 period, 181 times in Old Babylonian, once in Middle Babylonian, 12 times in Neo-Assyrian, once in New Babylonian. Sagiga comes in as a word after Namlulu had already been in textual sources. We can see that its earliest attestation as Sagi is found once in the Ur 3 period. Then it's used 46 times during the Old Babylonian period, 1 in Middle Assyrian, 1 in Middle Babylonian, 5 times in Middle in Neo-Assyrian. So with all of that we know about this term Sangiga, it appears after the Akkadian and Gutian rule. In other words, in pre-Sargonic Sumer, they already used the term that would describe themselves as humanity or mankind or the people. And that was Namlulu, because to date we have no earlier attestations for Sagiga prior to the Ur 3 period. Now, in the electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary, we find it right here, Sagiga, mankind. And it gives you the different attestations of it. If you go and read it, you can go through each one of these, you can click on it, and you'll pull up the inscription with the mention.
So Ur 3 is the oldest period.
Well, that's the oldest for this particular usage.
Okay, oldest for that usage, and that
Yes.
would be like late Sumer or
Yes, this would be in what they refer to as the Renaissance period.
in Renaissance. And who exactly, like, how was that earliest term used in that Renaissance period?
It was, well, if you look at it, if I have it, if you look at, I don't have it in front of me where you have to click it onto it, but it was always used as well, the way they translate it as the blackheads. But as we mentioned earlier, we were talking, in many of these inscriptions, they talk about how the gods had protected, or whenever they're making reference to humans at a point, they said, and say in the god of the blackheads and buried this person and that person.
Yeah, so like it seems to me, just from what I'm hearing, is that the context that they used, like as you mentioned, it wasn't about the hair, it wasn't about the skin, so it had to have been like some other color context that was not related.
It's not even, in this case, it's not even used in a color scheme, and we're going to see that as we go further.
Oh wow, like so
Yes.
they didn't even mean the color, is what you're saying?
No.
Oh,
No.
wow.
After the flood had swept over and brought about the destruction of the countries, when mankind was made to endure and the seed of mankind was preserved, I scratched out blackhead, humanity, the people, all rose. And in this particular inscription, the rulers of Lagash, lines 1 through 5, in the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, it literally has all three. You have Namlu, Namlukulu, you have Namun, Namlu, and you had Unsangiga. So he's right here, it's giving you that after the flood has swept over and brought about the destruction of the countries. Keep in mind that in various Sumerian creation myths, you have, I think it was in Enki and in her side, where they talk about the creation of man, it started off as defects. Some didn't have this limb. Some had a drippy penis. Some had this and that. And it wasn't a perfection until the Sagiga, which is the humans or humanity. Now, as you just read, it's about mankind as a civilizational creation, rendering mankind capable of giving praises, which was the key point. They had now the ability to give praise to the gods, which explains the use of Namlulu, Numun Namlulu, and Sagiga being used simultaneously. Humanity, mankind, and the offspring of humanity, and the flocks of humanity. And the flocks are the Sagiga, because when you find the references to Sangiga in Gudale's writings, he's always associating them with the flocks. The shepherds are the gods or the kings, and his flocks are humanity, which is Sangiga. Let me get to the main point before, because I don't want to. Okay.
Because I'm always thinking that G means black. So you gonna explain that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, see, that's where we're getting to right now.
Yeah.
Where it's identifying humankind. The Earthly period is during the Sumerian Renaissance period after the Akkadians and Gutian occupation, not prior. The reference to all phrases, Sagiga, humankind, lexical associations, you'll find this where the Akkadians use it as Zamak Kakali. Right here, as you see. Kakali. And that's the same as humanity, but in English translations, it's blackheads, because they're using literal terminology. So Zamak Kakali, blackhead, humanity. The pronunciations, and the Akkadian is the term that's used when referencing a native Mesopotamian. The Sumerian equivalent, of course, is Sangi. The cuneiform sign Nga is pronounced like it's sing. So we say Sangia. That's how at least the Assyriologists have put it together. So Zamak Kakali, it's interesting to note when discussing the Sumerian people and language, when it came to humanity, the Akkadians offers a window into the way the Sumerians saw humanity. The expression Zamak Kakali, an Akkadian word, is a poetic term referencing mankind as a totality created by the gods to keep in safe pastures by the kings. The literal meaning likewise poses a problem because the reference to black hair is without any parallel in Akkadian.
Yeah, that's the key right there.
Oh.
That's the key right there, because the Sangiga. So that Akkadian term, they borrowed it from Sumerian.
No, the Sumerians.
Oh, the Sumerians borrowed it
The
from
other
the.
way, yeah, because the first use of it comes during the Renaissance period. And the
Okay.
Renaissance came after the Gutians had, I think it was Urnamo, after he had eradicated the Gutians out of the north. This
Yeah.
brought about the Renaissance, when the thousands and thousands of literature that comes out came during this period. Urnamo, you got Urnamo, you had damn, I can't remember their names right now. But it was during this period, during the Renaissance, that all of these texts started coming. And then we find Sagiga as being the choice term, which essentially meant the same thing, because Sabakakali was the term that they used for mankind.
So and I can look at this from a linguistics, from a morpheme, looking at the morpheme boundary. But even going beyond the morpheme boundary, that gi right there. So that gi is not associated with black. Like that middle gi, that's not black.
Sang is head,
Yeah.
and the gi here is usually what's identified as black.
Okay.
That's where the problem, I think, that in the transliterations, in the translation, they use this as the literal meaning.
Yeah.
But in these inscriptions, the way that it's written, if you read the context of it, it becomes clear. But if you were to just take one word, and because you see "geek" there, then you're going to be that, oh, that's talking about black. But there's no reference to color that's being presented here.
So if you do the reconstruction of that term, you can figure out that that's an Akkadian term, and that's a Semitic term, because Akkadian is Semitic.
Yes.
So based off of that, like what I can gather is the gi is maybe related to the kaka in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah, perhaps. I didn't even look at it that way.
They use the orthography that they typically is associated with black to be able to render that Semitic term.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I can see from a historical linguistics perspective. And from that, like, if I can think of an example, like let's say the Kem glyph, and I know, Asar Imhotep uses this example a lot, where it means complete, right? And let's say that a group, let's say like the Amharic speakers, you speak a Semitic language, if they borrowed a term for Kem in the Pharaonic language, in their language, somebody could look at that borrowed term and say, hey, it means black, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just that they took maybe some orthography, some pronunciation, or some element of that. In this case, it's the actual cuneiform letter to transcribe it, but it doesn't mean that in the original context.
Right.
Okay.
And context, as I keep saying, context is key.
Yeah.
This can be seen in the Code of Hammurabi, line 40 and 44. Right in here, the Lakokali Wasema. It was then that Anu and Enlil ordained Hammurabi, a devout prince who fears the gods, to demonstrate justice within the land, to destroy evil and wickedness, to stop the mighty exploiting the weak, to rise like Shemesh over the mass of humanity, illuminating the land. Anu and Enlil ordained me to improve the welfare of my people. Humanity. But if you were to look at the English translations by some, instead of saying mass of humanity, it'll say mass of the blackheads.
And this is kind of where, I can see some individuals, like the folk etymology, me being familiar with the way the linguistic side of things, I can see someone making the argument that because everybody was black at that time, and because they knew that, they took the word, the orthography for black in Sumerian to render that Akkadian term, because in the Earth 3 period, everybody was black. I can see someone making that argument, but it doesn't necessarily pass the smell test.
No, well, you see that, but there's some people who are trying to put that out online. That's where the mistake, and that's where the problem comes in, because this kind of stuff it gains traction because it hasn't been satisfactorily challenged by going into the inscriptions itself. If you go to the Assyrian dictionary, if you go to the CAD, the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary, you find every reference to it and how it's used. And I just happened to pull up some where we somebody Kagadi, the dark-headed, a poetic expression for mankind. Now, when you look up what a poetic expression is, I think it becomes pretty clear. It's not meaning to be taken literal,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I
But
see that.
in every instance that we find it, at least by way of the Akkadians, it has nothing to do with hair or the skin of someone. It's literally talking about a collective of people.
Yeah, and it's just it's really fascinating because I'm looking at Joe Bailey. He has a few comments here, and he's just asking because I think he commented on the original video where he spoke about the black phenotype for the Jericho specimen, and he's asking what time was the transition from, you know, a black phenotype or a Africoid phenotype to the modern phenotype? Like, what would you say would be the time period?
That's outside of my study. People who deal with, I guess, skin tones or locations, all that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily get into that, so I can't really comment directly on it. If we look at the iconography of, say, the Sumerians, Akkadians, we can't use Nimrod. I'm not sorry. We can't use Sargon because Sargon was adopted. So we don't know what his background is. Now, he very, very well may have been an African.
I thought he was a Akkadian or, you know, Semitic.
Well, he was a king of Akkad, but he was, according to the story in his own inscriptions that are attributed to him, is that he was pulled from the river.
From the river.
And then raised as a cupbearer of, I think, Lugal-Zaghazi. I think it was Lugal-Zaghazi. But he was brought into the royal court. And then he rose to become the king and by far the most successful ruler to take over all of the Sumerian city-states.
So before we move on, I just want to like ask this question because
We don't have too much time. We don't have to do a part two.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a part two, but I wanted to make sure that I have this question.
Go ahead.
Because everybody, like, okay, a lot of people in the chat, a lot of people who are following, they value African-centered scholarship. And you mentioned in the beginning that it's important because Westerners said that, you know, we didn't have history. Right? So in refuting this, do you think that it is a major issue with African-centered scholarship that so many from Runoko Rashidi to Clyde Winters to Julia Donzi-Houston got this wrong? Like, does that, you know, hamper the value of Africana studies, or is there a way that it could be resurrected with, you know, better scholarship?
2 points. As far as Mother Donzi-Houston, she at that what she was presenting, her methodology, her research, that was the best at that time. I mean, you're talking at that period in the 1920s, 1926.
Yeah.
That was the cutting edge of information, especially at a time coming from a black woman of all things.
Yes.
That was I'm sorry, thank you. That was in its day untouchable because nobody had ever done it that way before.
Yep.
So I don't fault her, just like I don't fault some people who had information back in the 1970s. As time progresses, we learn more, we evolve. Knowledge is constantly growing. What I'm dealing with right now, 50 years from now, be obsolete. They may, by that time, more inscriptions will have come about and translated, and it'll be much easier. People will be able to see it for themselves.
Yeah.
And it may have shed more light on this. So I'm just in a period in time where the information that I'm sharing from my own to your audience, later on, it may either be refuted or it may be verified on a whole different level.
Mm.
So in as far as Black academia and the scholarship, my thing is this: we, granted, there's a vast amount of information in Africa.
Yes.
There's a massive amount of information that we find with the various Sudanese, South. There's so much information in Kemet,
Yeah.
but in Assyriology, we don't have any brothers.
Yeah.
We don't have any sisters.
We don't.
So my thing is this: we need Black Assyriologists, at least to bring a balance to where they can learn the language, the culture, the history of ancient Mesopotamia, not just Sumerians, but Mesopotamia as a whole. We need that. What I do, I mean, I'm 60 years old. Down the road, hopefully there'll be some young brothers and sisters that'll come up that will be on the level, and I know it'll surpass people like Samuel Kramer, because all of those names, Kramer and all of them guys, they're pretty much obsolete for the most part, because the knowledge that they had was at that point. Today, we got some of the sharpest Assyriologists that's taking this thing on a whole nother level.
Yeah, and for you to not have any, because in the Kemet, context, the ancient classical Africa, it is so ubiquitous, the amount of times that they refer to themselves as Black. And for you not to see that in Sumeria, in my view, shows that they were completely distinct populations.
Yeah. And that was my point earlier, was that I mean, in a sense, I'm alone out there. I mean, I'm not an Assyriologist. I'm just a young brother that enjoy as a hobby the Sumerian language.
Yeah.
And the history and the culture. I like watching documentaries. My father and I, back in 1973, I remember it because he was an insomniac like I am now. We would watch the Late Late Show before cable and all that stuff, and we would watch in DC. We would watch WJLA, TV7. We would watch Chariots of the Gods, and I would just be mesmerized by the information that's presented. I mean, I still watch it to this day on Fridays at work. I watch it on the computer, but I don't believe a word of it. But that was the thing that me and my father used to do all the time. My father was like that kind of a nerd in a sense, even though he was a rock and roller. But that put me in that area of thinking to where I am now, and all I'm trying to do is not attack those great writers and people who did work. The late Rashidi Renovo Rashidi.
Yeah.
I don't challenge him on what he was able to present. What I read earlier was that based on the Bible is where he came up with that position of Cush and Kish. But when you probe into the Emir or Sumerian language, you're going to see that that's not what it reflects. When you see Kish, it's not making reference to a people likened or designated as a toponym for ancient or southern or the south of Egypt in what we know today as Sudan or southern Sudan, or the Sudanese people, or even Africans as a whole.
Yeah. And you told me in the back, there isn't a term that the Sumerians had for Black people or Africans.
That's the point that I was trying to get across, because they're trying to stretch this Sagida as if blackhead meant Black people, but you won't find any illustrations or carvings of black-headed without a body, depending on what the stone is made of. Because if you look at many, because Gudea has like 71 statues of himself. Something like you see before me, because this is, you look at this statue of this bust of Gudea. This one is, what is it, made of ivory or something like that? I don't remember what it was. But this is different than some of the other statues of Gudea that we normally see. Diorite, marble, some green, some blue, some black, but not a black head by itself. You may find when they excavated the location in Nagash, yeah, they found statues that were separated from the bodies, of course, but you don't find an intact or even you don't find a body of a Sumerian king with a black head and a pale body, or a pale body and a black head,
Yeah, that's what kind of, and to me,
or
honestly,
white head and a black head.
as I'm thinking about this, like when you put up, Sagiga, I can see how someone from the text corpus could look at that gi and say that that's black and it's blackheads. But in the terms of Kemet, like when you're thinking about Kemet and it being related to the black soil, there's no primary attestation for that. So actually, I would say Kemet being black soil is worse than somebody saying Sagiga is blackhead. Would you agree?
Wait a minute. That last part, say that last part again.
Saying Kemet meaning black soil is actually a worse interpretation than Sagiga being blackhead, because at least you can kind of look at Gi and Sagiga and say, hey, that's black, so maybe that means blackhead. Versus Kemet, there's no primary attestation connecting it to the soil whatsoever.
Well, if you don't have a primary source that's making that reference, then it can't be that. It can't be that.
Yeah, and the 049 glyph, it doesn't refer to soil. It refers to municipality, city, type of district. So yeah, I was just thinking about that, Sagiga, it would, because this is really in depth. And if somebody didn't go in this in depth the way you've gone, it would be really easy to just look at a dictionary or a scholar and make that mistake.
Yeah, right? And that's why I had said earlier we need some black Assyriologists or Sumerologists, because if there is some information out there that say I can't access, then you being in that circle, you might have an opportunity to bring something out that might refute this.
Yeah.
See, I'm not stuck in this thing and saying, well, it's this and it's absolute. But to date, we just don't have the evidence to support the notions of a black Sumer. We have a bunch of different things, and even some that are deceptive.
Yeah.
Now, I put this up because this Megan Lewis, this is my Sumerian language teacher, one of them, and she did a show with Dr. Padani, and she's one of the leading Assyriologists and archaeologists and Sumerian language specialists right now, one of them. And I asked the question because I was trying to do another article where I said that has there been any discoveries of actual Sumerian kings? And she had pointed out that in the history of Mesopotamian archaeology, there have been, has there been in it? And she said that so early in history of kingship that maybe 2450 BC, early in these wouldn't be kings we would necessarily know from inscriptions because they weren't writing royal inscriptions. But this amount of wealth in the tombs really does not suggest we're kings and queens. But what's really striking, and I think is to your question, is how few there are of Mesopotamian history, how few royal tombs have been uncovered, because we know of hundreds and hundreds of royal names, not just famous ones, minor kings. I mean, we've got 3,000 years of history, and throughout most of that time, Mesopotamia wasn't unified, and so there were kings and queens ruling all over the place, and they must have been buried, and presumably they were buried in style. But just a handful have been found for that entire interesting, and it is just a puzzling. It's just a puzzle. It's really interesting. The reason I was asking that because I was reading something where someone said that they have, I think they said that they had Sumerian DNA shows that they were related to Africans. They had the J this and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But this is one of the skeletal remains that's in the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology at the Penn Museum. Regarding the so-called Sumerian DNA, I consulted the author of 8 books and over 100 research papers on the ancient Mesopotamia, Lorenz Bergman of the University, that's where, in Italy. He said, "Dear Chuck, we know nothing about the origin of the Sumerians that probably arrived late in the 4th millennium in Mesopotamia, but from where? At this point, it's correct to say that there are dozens of hypotheses. However, none could be proven. It is correct to say that we know few of the physical anthropology, or if you prefer, the race of the Sumerians, because no analysis on skeletal remains have been done systematically. On the latter question, you may be interested in the introduction chapters of Gene Evans' book, 2012, The Lives of Sumerian Sculpture and Archaeology of the Early Dynastic Temple. On the Sumerian problem, a synthesis has been produced by Tom B. Jones in 1969, The Sumerian Problem. That's the book, The Sumerian Problem. Besides that date of the volume, no new data has changed the situation. And I made that point because the reason for the lack of DNA verification is unfortunately due to the chemical composition of Mesopotamian soil that does not permit to preserve ancient DNA, as illustrated in the book Mesopotamian Antica. Copy that and see this, but let me see. The followers of new archaeology aimed at the reconstruction of interactions between human populations and their environments. This new paradigm, the research on human remains, was much more underlined than in the discussion on the Sumerian race. Also, because the general poor state of preservation of bones in Mesopotamia, the scarcity of well-preserved skulls, which were suitable for racial speculations, made the physical anthropology only a supplement for linguistic and archaeological data in ethnogenetical speculations. Department of Historical Anthropology, Institute of Archaeology, also University. This is a pretty extensive article, but I was just pointing out that when people say that, the DNA, there is no DNA.
Yeah.
There are no DNA analysis of Sumerian remains. That's it, because that, remember, Sumer became a desolate, dry wasteland.
Yeah.
And this is illustrated in Sumerian literature, as I'm going to see if I can pull that up, when it starts talking about how the land would no longer yield anything, vegetation, nothing. And then by that time, as Sumer was dying out under Ibn Sin, those bands of the Amartu, as well as Elamites, started coming back in, including the remnants of Gutian, the Gutians, who would hit and move. They basically utterly destroyed the Sumerian civilization. And then we have other people moved in, like the Babylonians, which is a mixture of this and that, and of course the Neo-Assyrians. By that time, the whole thing had changed. So we just don't, that link died off. Some people said the Sumerians never existed because you can't find anything on them other than writing.
Yeah, and I posted that on the community tab where I said that scholars don't really know how they look like at all, you know.
all we have are the images that they left of themselves. Now this is these are figures assembled from different colored materials. This is going in late Uric in the early dynastic periods. You can find this in the Art of the First Cities, the 3rd millennium BC, from the Mediterranean to the Indus. And these would be up in the area of Kish. You got me there, Kish. Yeah. So just like here is Ernanchi Gersu, is the Department of Oriental Antiquities. You can just, if you can make out just this is the standard depiction that they had of themselves. Okay, I'm not saying, all I'm going by is how they depicted themselves. I'm not going to go on the what's the thing called what do you, it was that pseudo reference he used. They say, I can't remember what they call it, but Shogi, that was the other guy. But you have to base them on what they say. And this is what my brother Zion Lex, because we talk from time to time about stuff like this, where he said, I think they know who they are, and I know that we sound crazy telling them that they are something other than what they themselves depict themselves as. We sound crazy. And I agree with him. I use that quote in that shout out to my brother, because yeah, they depicted themselves a certain way. And that was the standard. But I don't see the black. I don't see the black. Huh?
Zion is one of the Hebrew Israelites who does believe the Sumerians are black, right?
He, the last, we had a conversation on Garfield show. I don't know what happened to that video. But he had made some, he kind of changed his view on certain aspects of it. Not necessarily that they were black, as in, a lot of what we see today in commentary, but basing it more on the possibility of Cushites as having occupied that area.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he can explain that better than I can. I'm just surmising that. But I took what he said as that's pretty deep. I gotta use that. But the standard was, like, you look at that at a piece of wood, it's called the Standard of Ur. This was the image that they depicted themselves, numerous going all the way back. In addition to that, you see the constant theme, which is the unibrow. I think that was in the
video.
Yeah, that was in the video. And here's some other images of Gudea. All right, we got this one here. It's alabaster. Okay, so here you have the prevailing element in the room that the Black Sumerian theorists tend to ignore. And this is something that should be very key in this whole narrative, this narration, is that they always depicted themselves with a prominent eyebrow. But my point was, in a lot of the African artworks that I've seen and consulted museums and other individuals, that's not a prevailing theme in the artwork. And they don't, for my research, they don't have legends, sacred texts that speak about the unibrow as being a gift from the gods.
Yeah, you don't really see that in Black culture.
Enlil gave you a fierce face and a serious brow.
Yeah, other than Anthony Davis, like, I can't think of any Black person with the unibrow.
I'll be sure. So that was kind of what I was trying to get with in addressing that, because of course Gudea is my favorite, because I read his bio and I just love how this guy was all for the peoples, and all he wanted to do was just love his God, Girsu.
Yeah.
And I just, a lot of these illustrations, the following are of the same individual Gudea of Lagash. There you have it. It's the same. This is the same individual.
Do you think that Anthony Davis could have the Sumerian gene?
I doubt it. Maybe he has a Mexican gene or some Indian, because that feature is prominent in places like India, Arabia, Iran, Mexico, Europe.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't find it as being a particularly African outstanding feature.
I've never seen it before.
Yeah, so I'm just, like I said, I'm trying to put this in book form.
Oh, you definitely need to. This is multiple books at this point. Yeah, so we're not going to have a chance to get in, because I wanted to get into the
We're going to do a part 2.
We will do a part 2, and I want to focus that on the linguistic connections, because there are people like, Asar and Hermo Hermstein, where they say they don't really believe in Black identification, but they're adamant that Sumerian is related to African languages. So we're going to investigate and interrogate that.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we need to get into that part and get that cleared up, because a lot of people are citing them. And, I don't know what their agenda is, but if we were to just walk through it and just deal with certain segments of what they is that they teach, we're going to find gaps and things
Of
that are
course.
blatant errors.
Yeah, after Clyde Winters, so just from the people who commented, emailed, sent me messages, I would say that Asar and Hermel Hermstein were like the two other people that people said that I should take a look at for proof that the Sumerians were like related to Africans. So we will definitely take that on next
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, let's do that. Because I think that is what my agenda is. I want to bring clarity. I want to bring context, and I want to offer the people a chance to go to these sources and then check them, and then look at the teachings of certain people who are advocating something that I wish we were. I wish that we were had black ancestors who were Sumerians. That would have been good. But again, as I was saying earlier, at that time in the 1920s and the early 1900s, they didn't know about the greatness of ancient Sumer, and they put a heavy emphasis on Babylonia.
Yeah.
Babylonia.
Yeah.
You know, using Shumeru. You know, they were just basing it on what the Akkadians and the Babylonians were saying. And even when Jules Obert and Rawlinson, they didn't even they were able to, when they talk about they deciphered the language and all that stuff, all they did was were able to show the link between just using two other languages. I think it was Persian and Babylonian. I think it's three, because initially they used the Beshun inscription, and they were only able to look at various sentences. But as far as the mass of inscriptions, 90% of it hadn't even been uncovered yet. In their time, they didn't have the thousands and thousands of texts that we have now, that we can go through these online databases that were established by universities, where the people can look at themselves. And then it sheds more light on information they didn't have. So people like Rawlinson and Jules Obert, and I forget the other guy's name. Them guys, they did their thing at their time, but they're obsolete.
Yeah.
They're listen. Rawlinson, Hicks, Obert, Jacobson, Kramer, Jeremy Black. Them guys, that's the old school. That was good back in their day. But then, we got Postgate, Jagersman, Pordani, Robio, Ezard, Finkel. We got people who have just happened to be on us. If we get some brothers and some sisters up in there, then we have a more balanced picture. And I advocate that. We need to have some African-centered Assyriologists.
Oh, definitely. Especially as it relates to, the whole Semitic question. Because I've always wondered or anticipated if they would find, Semitic originating in Africa, not to validate Afro-Asiatic, but just to show that, this could be an independent language isolate. And maybe that would speak to, why they actually use these terminologies and why they're related in Maluha to Africa. Like, maybe we could get an answer to that, because that's still like, even with respect to your presentation, I'm just like, why? Why would you do that? Like, what is the reason that you did that?
Well, for one, I know. Remember, they were having conflicts with Egypt at the time. Who was it? Ashur-Hadan, Ashurbanipal, and then during Ashur-Hadan's period, it just switched. For no apparent reason, he just started having Maluha likening it to Kush, and Magan being Kemet.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of many possibilities. Maybe it could have been of immigrants who went to those regions, or princes and princesses, or I don't know. Like, there could have been a variety of reasons, but obviously from the Greeks and the Hebrew authors later on, they mirrored that in their literature. So getting to the bottom of that would help clarify just like a lot of historiography that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Even okay, it's like, all right, if somebody here's an example. Okay, so is what's something called the Sisu tree was it known in Egypt and Nubia? And I did a little check on it. The sisu tree is a large tree that is native to India and Pakistan. The sisu tree was introduced to Egypt by Ibrahim Basha in the age of Muhammad Ali, 1805 to 1848, for ornamental and timber purposes. But we find that as being something that they identified with Egypt when it was something that was brought into Egypt later.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's so many questions that you can ask.
Yeah, there's just like we're almost at 3 hours and we've only.
I'm not going to do that. I'm stop.
Yeah,
this is my thing. This is my thing, and I really enjoy. I appreciate you. The videos. I always catch them when they come in. We're in Discord together. I always catch them and watch them. They're very. I mean, they're enlightening for me, and I do appreciate you allowing me the time to share what little bit of information that I have with your audience, and hoping that it'll stimulate some out there to want to go a step further and start investigating this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Researching.
All of this is for the up and coming next generation, and you know, we don't necessarily need the bad scholarship from the pseudo linguistics and folk etymology. We just have to up the ante, and I'm all for authentic sources.
We're on the same page.
Yep. And again, if anybody has, like, if there's any Assyriologists out there who can challenge this information, feel free to come on in. Personally, the people who have been, even some people sending me hate messages and stuff, I haven't seen anything.
I talked to one Assyriologist, and it was talking about once you do a presentation on that, and it's like, I would like to, but I don't want it because I'm a white guy, and for me to get up there and try to go for a predominantly black audience and tell them no, the Sumerians. I don't think I want to get into that arena. You do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that black people should do. Obviously, like black people, because they can't, you know, accuse. Because there's a lot of Hebrew Israelites in the comment section. Some more is in the comment section right now. And there's some of them being pretty respectful, but I can tell that they disagree. And
I mean, that's cool. That's cool. But you know me, I'm kind of on a confrontational tip. So in the chat, I probably will do some responses, but I'll pull back on the profanity and things like that, because I want this to be an area where people can go further with it, because I'm just scratching the surface on a lot of this stuff. You know, but what is key to this unraveling this puzzle is, and I cannot stress this enough, is knowing the language. Specifically, I'm saying in my study is ancient Sumer. So Sumerian literature and their language, and my specialty is focused more in the 4-3 period, because you can go to Ur-2. Some of that, when I look at those inscriptions, I can't make heads or tails of it. You know, because it's just so complicated. How in the world are they even read? So when you get to the period of Ornamu, Shogi, Gudea, the inscriptions are pretty clear and it's much easier to read. And that's where my training comes in.
Yeah, and even on that point, like, even when people mention Sumer being older than Kemet, like, I disagree with that notion so much, because there's so much about Sumer that we don't know. Like, there's so much. So we don't even know what the language is related to. So, like, the value of the culture today is not really useful because we can't really compare it to anything. So it's like,
and I mean, even with that's believe it or not, that's an area I never really even touched. It's like, who's older? And I don't really even want to, because it's just like, I got so many other things on that topic that I have to deal with to get some clarity on. As to, because from different people with this, and they evolve independently over time, you know, and depending on where and who, because I think we was even trying to tap into earlier. Is I was saying, because someone said that the Sumerians developed the Sumerian civilization, and then people showing different traits. I had never seen and from the Egyptologists that I know or spoke with, or people who specialize in the Sumerian, specialize in the Egyptian language, I've never seen this, the word for Kemet, Egypt, Ramesh, never seen any of that in Sumerian literature. I find no reference to ancient Kemet. And on the flip side, I haven't seen anybody present Egyptian texts where they speak about ancient Sumer.
Yeah.
And that's strange.
It is really strange because I mean I have evidence that they're speaking about Chad, even tributaries in Nigeria with Sekhet Heret and these different terminologies that they use in the Amduat. So for them to speak about Inner Africa in many different references, but not speak about Samaria, to me that speaks to the origin of the civilization being in Inner Africa and not Mesopotamia. That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So we are at about 3 hours. So do you have anything you want to leave the audience before we
All I
off?
wanted to do is leave with the audience is don't just accept it. If you watch this, slow it down, freeze it, write this stuff down before I get this stuff in book form, and just analyze it, scrutinize it, criticize it. I don't care. I want this information to be used in a positive way, and then who knows, some people that may want to challenge it or challenge other people with it. The documentation is sound. The research is clear. This is years of research. And again, one of the things that I would hope, if I see it in my lifetime, and I'm sure there are some that just haven't made it into a level of prominence, is that we have some brothers and some sisters in Assyriology. We got them everywhere. You got multiple brothers as Egyptologists. You got a lot of brothers who are African centered and who deals with all of the different African nations and families in Africa, North, South, and East and West.
Yep.
But I don't find in this area, and it's lonely out there because when I'm taking these Sumerian classes online and I see everybody, all you see is just pale. I ain't gonna say it like that, but I'm the only brother that's there. You might have a couple of Arabs here, depending on what part of the world they're in. But I don't mind because hey, when I look back at some of the innovators and the pioneers who took things in a different direction back in the past, they were the only ones there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good. But at the same time, now that I'm pretty seasoned with it, I want to see more of us, not to mess it up and say, oh yeah, everybody's black and here's what. No, I want us to be prominent in that area. When you see Assyriologists, you'll see some brothers, you see some brown faces up there too.
Yeah.
It's got to be that way.
Especially with the amount of us who are interested in this topic. Like there should be some of us studying it at the highest level.
I mean, you have brothers that are from the Indus Valley that I know, some individuals I know, but a lot of them kind of biased. Oh no, the Sumerians, they were us. Yeah, but that's not the point. The point I'm making is that people who reach a level of prominence, who have really put in some work to get to that level, that have debated, who have been peer reviewed, that have been placed side by side with some of the greats. We need to get up there.
No, we definitely do.
Absolutely.
Definitely do. So with that, this has been a really great episode. This Sumer review with the elder scholar Chuck Morgan. If you appreciate the show, you can hit the Cash App. That's $Comgyverse. Hit the like, share, and subscribe. Share this to everybody you know, especially those who do believe, and even if they disagree about the Sumerians being, non-black or black, share this. It's definitely a must-watch. And with that, shout out to everybody in the building, and we are signing out.
Welcome to Comgyverse. This is your exclusive bridge between the legacy of classical Africa and the triumphs of modern African revolutions. You won't find this connection anywhere else. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Share this video with friends and family. Become a channel member or join our Patreon. The links are waiting in the description. Let's honor our sacred legacy and ignite our future together.
Shut up, you dumb, you sound like a coon. Get out, stay clear of this room. We proud, we black, rich, and forever stay paid. They lies and killing spraying from the soil they mislaid. Their tales are sham, cooked up by scammers who toil. So shut up, chief X, you're a grifter, spoiled. Your bow-having drivel like your soul. Coptic verse, their language is liturgical, not the rehearsed curse. While Ethiopian and Nubian cops and Cairo so merciful. Drop true surgical, leaving your myths pitiful.
You act like black folks ain't speaking remake. Give me your idiocy, buds deep. Can't study, can't even see me. Bubble brother, hush up before I knock your sugar out. Don't twist our ancestors' lore, I'll butcher your clout.
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies to lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. Kemet unfiltered, let pride take flight.
You claim you came from Baltimore, just more trash on display. I bet the faithful flock was up, dusting your ass away. Into that fat orange cat, you're dumber than a box of rocks. Pushing assimilation as politics that shock like cheap mock.
We spot you from a mile, your act just isn't slick. This is real knowledge, not your kuna logical scholarship.
If you scared, you should be watching as I spit. God's flame, no bars, no game. You're done when I put you to shame.
When your twisted lies crumble and your fake talk fades, our united voice echoes, truth never degrades. From the ashes of deceit, our spirit invades. In Kemet's name, your false crown forever cascades.
Ghazi aka Amir, the scams are total disgrace. Spitting away with one jargon at a crooked scheme and pace. So twist words confused, try to carve up a space. A fraud, your fake gospel body king with no base. You try to fool slow blacks with your bogus empty guys, but your clumsy act crumbles under truth's piercing eyes. Kemet stands united, no room for your deceitful art. Step aside, false prophet, your lies will break a heart.
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies to lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. Kemet unfiltered, let pride take flight.
Unity in Kemet, our truth burns bright. We stand as one, exposing your lies tonight. No scam or false prophet can dim our light. Kemet unfiltered.